2-2 to Torres. Bouncing ball towards the middle. Edman with a spin and a throw. And the Dodgers dominate Game 3. They're a win away from a world championship. A 3-0 series lead over the Yankees.
With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. That's what it sounded like yesterday on Fox Sports as the LA Dodgers take a commanding 3-0 series lead in the World Series. Alex, I have enjoyed this series. I did not enjoy that game. That was a complete letdown relative to what I was hoping for. And honestly, the Yankees are just fizzling out right now. They look like that firecracker that isn't a total dud, where you light it, you ignite it, it gets ready to go, and then it's like the bottle rocket that just...
Oh, yeah. Or it's those black snakes that you light, and they're just...
That's it.
That was a waste of money.
That's it. And it just... You're like, oh, I thought there was going to be more there.
That cost me $25.
That's it. That's all we've got, apparently. That's who the Yankees have been so far in this series. And it's not the way that I was hoping. I think they're going to win in Game 4. I think they will force a Game 5. And then I think that's going to be it, honestly. Alex, what did you take from last night? What have you taken from this series so far?
It's been a fun series on paper. Like, the first 2 games had the storylines with it. You're right. Like, last night was super boring. I was waiting for that big moment where the Yankees pulled themselves back in, and didn't happen until the 9th, and it was that firecracker that BK was talking about. It's like, hey, nope, not it. I think the most appealing part of that game last night for me was watching Walker Buehler deal, because you're watching it as a Cardinals fan, and you're watching it and you're thinking like, okay, this is a dude that nobody really thought was going to have a comeback.
He saved their season.
Yeah, in back-to-back games, he has been the savior for the LA Dodgers. And so you're watching it as a Cardinals fan, and you're like, damn, it's like, if this guy can do that, it's like maybe this is something the Cardinals can find a way to locate that type of player in the offseason. But in terms of just this World Series, it just feels like the Yankees exhausted all of their options to get to the World Series. And then now it's like, finally we're here. And then there's nothing else to give, because the Dodgers just seem like they're too much for the Yankees. Some of this might be the path. Some of this just might be the Yankees' best players having their magical moments in the DS and the CS, and you just can't get that magic in the World Series. But they just feel like a team that has fizzled out. I don't think they win tonight. I think this is done.
Damn. I think to your point on the Yankees and what's the difference here, I think it's the matchup. I think they just had an easy path. And we talked about it at the time. Listen, I'm a Royals fan. That's my team, right? That team's super flawed. I knew it as a Royals fan. Everybody can see it. They had a good starting rotation. They have a few good pieces out of the bullpen, and they've got 3 dudes in their lineup, really 2, because one was coming back from the hand injury. 2 guys in your lineup that really scare you, and that's it. If you make sure Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvador Perez don't beat you, felt pretty good about beating the Kansas City Royals, because they just couldn't score runs. So they found a way to do that. They avoided, and really it took a little while for them to figure this out, but they avoided pitching to Bobby Witt Jr. and boom, figure out a way to get to the ALCS. Then you get against the Guardians. Decent offense, not a star-studded lineup, but a good lineup, productive lineup nonetheless. Good bullpen. Clase imploded. The rotation wasn't great. They didn't have enough pitching, and boom, Yankees in the World Series. And that's it. It was that simple. I think sometimes you see situations where a team just gets an advantageous path. They don't have to apologize for it. They got to the World Series. You get into the World Series, though, and I think what we have seen is that the National League was just significantly better than its counterpart in the AL this year. I think the Dodgers were better than the Yankees. I think the Padres were better than the Yankees. I think if you had seen it, the Mets would have been better than the Yankees in this year's World Series as well, though that one would have been a little tighter to me. I think there were at least 2, maybe 3 teams in the NL that were clearly, definitively better than the Yankees once we got here.
Yeah, and that's where I am. I mean, you look at this series, and it's just clear the Dodgers are playing on another level. And I think the Padres would have done that if they got to the World Series as well. Because, I mean, you look at the Dodgers, they're hitting 1 through 9. You look at the Yankees, it's basically been Juan Soto, Giancarlo Stanton, and outside of that, and that includes Aaron Judge, that will belong with this other group of players, they've done nothing so far. And that's why they had to send Stanton on that play last night, because they had to try and create some sort of spark offensively. And then their pitching's just been fine. You know, Garrett Cole didn't have really a Garrett Cole type season. He dealt with the elbow injury. Carlos Rodon was okay in that game too. And then you look at it and you got Clark Schmidt, who's like a number 4 that we were talking about at the deadline today. As like, hey, boy, wouldn't that be great if you had a cost control young pitcher like a Clark Schmidt, who AKA
and that wasn't this year's. That was last year's deadline.
Yeah, it was worse than Andre Palante. Like,
also can't find the strike zone.
Yeah, it doesn't shock me that you're looking at this and going, man, and then their bullpen's been okay in this series, but you just look at the Yankees and you go, man, that is a flawed baseball team. They can't field the ball. They stink at the base paths. Like, they are just not a very good baseball team that it's clear their path was the reason they got to the World Series.
Got the star players. The problem is, like, the starriest of their star players has not performed, but the difference is they don't have the supporting cast behind their star players. We're seeing Tommy Edman, Kike Hernandez, Will Smith, Max Muncy come up with big plays. Whereas, like you just mentioned, the Yankees have Soto and Stanton. Judge has not done anything, and then you're just asking for somebody to step to the plate and help this team
and beyond
out.
that, it's not even just the offense; it's also defense. Like, their defense is incredibly flawed. Their base running is horrific.
Yeah.
I think it was. It was their play-by-play guy, the Yankees play-by-play broadcaster,
John
Sterling, who said they run the bases like a bunch of drunks. And he's right. They're terrible on the base paths. And that's been the case all year long. I remember listening to Yankees fans this season talk about their team. You would have thought they were 20 games below 500. They hated this Yankees team, hated it. And they found a way to get to the World Series. Again, never apologize for your team winning in the postseason. If you get there, you deserved it. But I think what we are now seeing, this Yankees team is going to be remembered because of their path, not because they were seen as a success to get to the World Series for the first time in 15 years. This team will be remembered like the 2019 Cardinals are here locally, where, yes, they did get to the NLCS. Nobody believed in it at the time. Nobody thought that team was going to do anything of significance, so much so that the stadium wasn't even full. You get to the NLCS, this is a city where if they believe in your team, they're going to sell out that stadium. Hell, it was sold out for the 2021 Wild Card Series against the Phillies. That stadium was rocking, dude. Game 1, I remember being there. You could hear a pin drop by the end, but that stadium, when Juan Soto hit that home run, it was electric. That wasn't the case in the 2019 NLCS. People were just done. They were done with that team. So that's how I think Yankees fans are feeling right now. You could feel it in the stadium last night, just watching it on television. It was not a raucous crowd. That stadium knew what was about to happen to them. Fat Joe came out. He did his thing before the game. You knew this ain't going to go well for the New York Yankees.
True.
T-Bone doesn't know Fat Joe.
No, but I saw the moment, and I was like, I had the same reaction. They're a team that's going to be remembered for their path. And that's what makes, I think, their offseason and Juan Soto's decision so fascinating is, does Juan Soto believe that the Yankees were a good baseball team? Or does he see what we see? Because he's going to be the shiny new object in free agency this offseason. And I think, like, the Yankees are the team that's going to give him everything. Here's the blank checkbook. Here, sign it. Create your contract. We'll give it to you. I don't believe in this team. They were clearly a team that was built or got to the World Series because of their path. They are flawed, and I think you're right. I think that 2019 Cardinals comparison is spot on. I don't know where you go from here if you're the Yankees. And I wonder how Juan Soto's going to view this team, because it's clear they are a major, major flaw in that organization of how they play as a baseball team.
I also think they're poorly coached. But
the worst thing that can happen to the Yankees with Juan Soto is to be playing against another team that has an endless budget in the World Series.
I don't think the Dodgers will do it, though. Is that what you mean? Like the Dodgers being the team that brings him in?
It could have been any other team, but yeah, I'm saying the Dodgers because the Dodgers have endless money, and if Juan Soto says, I want to be a Dodger, Dodgers find a way to do that.
I don't think they will. I think as much as we talk about the Dodgers being the team that just has this endless budget, think about the way that they've spent it. They've been really smart about the players that they go after. Shohei Ohtani is just good for business. Like this World Series so far has been more viewed in Japan than it has in the United States. That is not a number that I'm pulling out of my you-know-what. That is actually based upon the numbers, the metrics that they have in television. There are more people watching this in Japan than in the United States right now, which is crazy, but it speaks to the Yamamoto and Shohei Ohtani effect. You look at what they did with Freddie Freeman. T-Bone, we were talking about this before the show today. There is no such thing as certainty in baseball, unless you have Freddie Freeman or Mookie Betts. And then suddenly you have a little bit of certainty, because those guys, you can write it in pen exactly what they're going to be year to year. I said this whenever the Cardinals were potentially interested in trading for Juan Soto. Juan Soto is an all-time great hitter. Patience at the plate, power, contact. He's got everything you could ask for as a hitter. I don't know how he's going to age. Not as a hitter, but just as a baseball player all around. Because he's not fast. He's already a relatively speaking, for his position, unathletic player. He's not good in the field. He is a liability defensively already and will probably have to either move to first base or be a DH sooner rather than later. What value does that have? There is value there, a lot of it. But I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. And to me, that means that if you're the Dodgers and you've got Shohei Ohtani, who's already a DH, you can't go out there and get Juan Soto. It just doesn't make sense for you, given what your roster already looks like with Shohei and Freddie Freeman. He's blocked. Yep. So I don't think they're a team that could even really consider going out there and making that move, even though, theoretically speaking, we all look at it, we're like, yeah, of course the Dodgers are going to get involved. I don't think they'll do it. I'd be genuinely shocked with that.
I don't think they do it because he doesn't carry the defensive value, but I could see where if you're the Dodgers and you say, how do we kind of bring the sledgehammer down after winning a World Series, you bring in Soto. I mean, everything that you said of him aging poorly, long term, I agree with that. If I'm in the winning window, he fits perfectly for the Dodgers.
But where
plays
do you play him?
He plays the I would go left field with him because Hernandez is a free agent at the end of the year. Now you've got him in left, and then by the time you get to the point when Freeman whether he retires when his contract's up, now I can shift him to first base potentially. He makes it makes sense for the Dodgers. Sure, he's bad defensively.
Have a center fielder that can cover more landscape with Mookie Betts and right.
Yeah, and now pitch to this lineup: Shohei, Betts, Freeman, Soto. Yep. Good luck.
I think I know this sounds crazy. I understand. I think they value defense too much. I really do.
Stupid Dodgers.
I don't think
we do too in St. Louis.
I don't think they feel like they need to add another bat to this lineup, given what they already have internally. I think they feel like they need the supplementary pieces that are necessary to be able to win around the lineup that they've already constructed. So I don't see them going out there and doing something like that. We'll hear from Jeff Passan, not on our show, but on a show in New York. He was asked about this exact scenario. Does he believe that the Dodgers will be somebody that are interested in Juan Soto? And we'll get to that coming up later on in the show. We will also hear from you. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. You can check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. That is where the Graveyard Chat is off and running. YouTube studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. You can always check us out on the 101 ESPN app as well. That is presented by Schaefer Door Company. We will be with you guys until 2 o'clock. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll dive into some NFL quick hitters, including, are we going to look back at Russell Wilson's time with the Broncos similarly to how we view Kurt Warner's time with the New York Giants? And basically, you forget that it ever happened. We'll talk about that coming up in about 15 minutes. But next, Mathieu Joseph is apparently hurt with the St. Louis Blues. Had no idea about this until yesterday. We'll talk about that, what it means for the Blues next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up in just a little bit, we'll get into some NFL quick hitters, including a question that I saw yesterday that I find really interesting. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Is Russell Wilson's time in Denver going to be remembered long-term the way that Kurt Warner's time in New York was? Because, T-Bone, did you remember that Kurt Warner played for the New York Giants?
I don't remember ever seeing him as a Giant, but I do remember that he was there at one point.
It's unbelievably forgettable. Was a Hall of Famer here, Hall of Famer for the Cardinals, took them to the Super Bowl. Did that for the St. Louis Rams, did that for the Cardinals, which is seemingly impossible for anybody else to accomplish. There was a little donut in the middle where he played for the Giants, and his body had broken down at that point, wasn't the same guy. Completely forgettable. Are we going to look at this the time that Russell Wilson had in Denver similarly? We'll get into that here in just a little bit. But, Alex, there was an interesting story that popped up yesterday, overnight really, by Mathieu Joseph, who is with the team as they're traveling right now. He reported that Mathieu Joseph is actually back in St. Louis right now because of a lower body injury that he sustained in the game against the Montreal Canadiens. It sounds like this is something that happened very late in that game, potentially even on his final shift of that game. This, to me, feels, I don't want to be overly dramatic about it, but I think it's a really big deal. It feels like the potential straw that broke the camel's back, because I don't think typically you would consider an injury to a third-line player that's playing like 13 minutes a night to be something that you can't overcome. The Blues can overcome this, as it won't be impossible for them to do so. But I think Mathieu Joseph has been quietly one of their most important players this year because he's willing to do all of the dirty work. The line that he's been on, regardless of who his line mates are, to me has been the most consistent line that the Blues have had so far this year. Whether that's Braden Shin centering it or Dylan Holloway centering it, it hasn't mattered who his line mates are. It's Joseph. That is the one that has been making the difference. We've compared him to Ivan Barbashev. I think there's some Jaden Schwartz in there as well with the dirty work that he's willing to do at the boards. And now he's potentially going to be out for a little while. Alex, what does this mean to you in regards to the Blues' near and long-term future?
Well, you've lost your depth now. And I know that sounds odd to say because, frankly, there really hasn't been a whole lot of offensive depth with this team. But I mean, when you take Mathieu Joseph out of this lineup, you no longer have a third line that I feel is as dangerous as it was prior because you just mentioned it. He's played with Braden Shen on the third line. That's been a scary good line with Dylan Holloway. Even the last couple of games, he was playing with Dylan Holloway and I think it was Kasperi Kapanen for one game and then Zach Bolduc for another game, and it was still an effective line combination. Mathieu Joseph is one of these guys. Craig Berube used to label them. Ken Hitchcock used to label them as pulse guys, to where every time you needed something from your team, you needed to find a pulse, you sent that line out with that player and they would go out there and find it. And Joseph has been that this season. Can you overcome that? Absolutely, because you're talking about a guy who plays 14, 15 minutes a night. The problem when you lose that player is who steps into that role. Who steps into the predictability role that Mathieu Joseph provided?
Kapanen.
That is not where I was going with this one.
I mean, that's the answer.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have to like it, but it's true.
I don't. They haven't.
Not feeling predictability with that.
They haven't put their line combinations out, but yeah, I would anticipate that third line looking
During practice
something
on
like
Monday, Kapanen entered the lineup alongside Bolduc and Holloway, according to Mathieu Joseph.
So there you go. I would anticipate that's your line combination, which that's not a line that I'm looking forward to throwing out there and seeing what they could provide, because not only does it not really have that offensive oomph that you're looking for that Mathieu Joseph provided, but you're not great defensively. And Mathieu Joseph has been better in his own end than he's been in the offensive zone. He's broken up plays just off of the rush alone with his speed and his physicality. So it's a massive task to take over, just like it was with Robert Thomas. But Robert Thomas, it felt like you could go a little pack mentality in the top six and you could play the north-south style. You're losing a north-south guy in Mathieu Joseph that I don't know how you fill that void.
And arguably two of your best defensive forwards.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is you're without both of them right now.
Penalty kill guys, too.
It's not just that you're losing Robert Thomas. It's now that you're, in addition to that, losing a guy that was on the wing. And eventually, I know every team will say, hey, next man up mentality, right? Next man up mentality. And if this is something that's short-term, if this is like a few games that he's going to be out, fine. But typically it's not a great sign when a player was on a road trip, gets evaluated, and they say, hey, we're going to have to send you back, man. Go ahead. Like, no need to be here. Go back to St. Louis. We'll get you evaluated there, and then we'll discuss what the next steps are. Typically, that is not a great sign as to what's coming with the news for Mathieu Joseph.
Yeah, I was texting with a couple of people who were on this road trip, and they said that at least Mathieu at the hotel before he went back seemed like he was in a pretty positive mindset. But again,
I think that's just his natural state, though.
Sure, but I mean, You got to imagine if you knew it was something severe, you'd be a little bit more depleted. But again, when you're getting sent back to St. Louis and you're getting reevaluated or evaluated in itself, that's not something. And Bannister, I believe, said, like, look, he could be ready by the time we get home. We just don't know until we get the evaluations back.
And I think with this injury, I mean, you mentioned predictability with Joseph. We talked about in the last segment about how, hey, Freddie Freeman's a guy you can write in pen of he's going to do this, and you know you're exactly going to get that. Joseph, whichever line he was on, that line you almost felt like you knew what you were getting. And now when you insert Kasperi Kapanen, look, Kapanen's had, 2, 3 good games. Like, he's had a couple good games so far this season, but he's not predictable. And when he comes into the lineup, he may play well for a game, but he could also have a game where you just don't see him. And if you don't see Kasperi Kapanen, all of a sudden now you're looking at the third line and going, okay, now we're one more line short. We don't really trust this line. And to your point on having a pack mentality without Robert Thomas, now you've lost that element a little bit because of the loss of Joseph. So I'm not trying to say like it's a raise the red alarm bells, but it is a significant injury that you hope is just going to be, to your point, 2 games.
So they've had to come back in almost every game this season, so the stat kind of seems pointless, but I'm just looking at the games that they did actually complete the comeback, and listen to the amount of shifts that Mathieu Joseph took. Versus Seattle, 20. Versus the Carolina Hurricanes, 20. Versus the Toronto Maple Leafs, 20. Versus the Winnipeg Jets. I know they didn't complete the comeback, but they were right there, 19. Some of these other games, he's playing 15, 16 shifts a game. So when the team...
what you're saying is when they're up late, he's a guy that you put on the ice.
Or when they're coming back in games, they're the one that he's the line that they're throwing out there.
They've had to come back in every game, so that wouldn't be.
But when they're completing the comeback,
right? And that is you're late in the game, third period, you're up, you want to ice this thing out, you're trying to kill plays in your own zone. Let's get Mathieu Joseph on the ice.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to be as a team, right? Like the goal is we want to be up late so we can win these games. And in those scenarios, Joseph's the guy that you want on the ice. If you're trying to come back, you want the offensively gifted players on the ice. So you're putting Kyrou out there. You're putting Buchnevich out there.
He's the player that you try and get a couple of shifts out there immediately to try and put a pulse back on the ice. And now you don't have that guy anymore.
He serves both ends. Like he's a good player. So you just want him on the ice. But if you're saying he's at 15-ish shifts in their losses and 20 shifts or so in their wins, there's a reason for that. It's because in the third period, when you're up, you want this guy on the ice. The problem is now, if you do not have him out there to be able to do that, to kill plays in your own zone, it becomes more difficult. And now you've got Kasperi Kapanen as one of the players that you're putting in those situations. And I personally don't feel the same way about that I do with Joseph. The other thing is, one thing that this team has been not great about, especially since Robert Thomas has gone down, is faceoffs. And a way that you can make up for that, and we've seen this a bit, Alex, is the Blues have been able to lose the draw and then take over the puck with a takeaway, right? Mm-hmm. And that might be a board battle, just finding a way to be tough on the puck, whatever it is. Mathieu Joseph is a big part of that. He's a guy that wins those battles a lot of the time. I don't know who replaces that now. The dirty work stuff, I know I've mentioned it a couple of different times. That is an area that this team has been much better at this season than they were a year ago, and I think a lot of that is tied into what Mathieu Joseph has brought to the table. So I do think it's a huge loss. They're not going to have him in Ottawa or Philadelphia. For each of the next 2 games, you expect to be without Mathieu Joseph, and then it becomes how long is he out beyond that? Mm-hmm. Is he able to get back at some point on that homestand in early November? We just don't know the answer to that just yet. One guy that we are expecting back in the lineup tonight, Alex, is Matt Kessel. Sounds like they're going to make Scott Perunovich, mercifully, a healthy scratch tonight in Ottawa.
And just a quick update, morning skate lines just got tweeted out by Matthew DeFranks, who's up in Ottawa. He is on the third pairing, is Matt Kessel with P.O. Joseph.
There you go. It's necessary. We talked about this yesterday. It was time to make this move. Alex, I did find it interesting in JR's piece yesterday that he posted. It was a mailbag, and somebody asked him a question. Hey, where do you think the defensive pairings will eventually settle? Once everybody's healthy, you're good to go there. And he said it's hard to say, naturally, but his projection would be Broberg with Parayko eventually, Suter and Falk, and then Leddy with P.O. Joseph as your third pair defensively whenever Leddy is back in the lineup. Alex, what am I missing with the Matt Kessel thing? Because to me, he's an ideal third pair defenseman. I think he's got a little more offensive upside than we gave him credit for early on. He is physical. I think he's played fine defensively. He had a couple of lapses in a game, but everybody has a couple of lapses in an individual game. He's still very young. I think he's a perfect third pair defenseman, but right now he was just losing time to Scott Perunovich. Mm-hmm. Long term, it's very possible that he loses time to P.O. Joseph. Is this saying something about Matt Kessel that they don't like, or is it saying something about the other guys that they do really like.
I think it's the latter. I think it's saying more about P.O. Joseph than it is Matt Kessel. Matt Kessel is a really good third-pair defenseman, and you saw that growth last season so much so that people were like, oh, he's the reason they're picking up victories. And I'm tinfoiling why JR's looking at his Nick Leddy over a Matt Kessel when they come back. Drew Bannister likes offense from his defensemen. He likes his defensemen to get into the rush. He talks about it all the time, the weak side D being a part of the offense. And P.O. Joseph has at least one shot on goal every single game this season. P.O. Joseph is not afraid to be in the offensive zone, take chances, take some shots, and then also get back because he's a bigger guy that can skate with some of these guys. Matt Kessel, and I'm not saying they're the same player, but Matt Kessel is more along the lines of a Tyler Tucker in terms of a defensive defenseman, to where it's the stay-at-home guy. You put him in there and he's able to play that shutdown role. And you have to imagine that if it's a Drew Bannister who likes his defensemen that have the offensive mindset, that's where a P.O. Joseph gets the upper hand over a Matt Kessel. The hard part here is Drew Bannister also likes left and right defensemen. And P.O. Joseph's a lefty just as much as Nick Leddy's a lefty. So obviously, this works itself out. We've already seen that happen multiple times this season. I'll be really interested, though, to see, like, if Matt Kessel has a good game tonight, if Nick Leddy's able to get back soon, who the odd man out is.
Yeah.
Can I be honest? Given where the Blues are at in their current development curve,
it should be
Kessel over Leddy.
Yeah.
And that's not an option right now. Leddy is still hurt, so you don't have to worry about that as of today. But when everybody is healthy and ready to go, I would have Kessel in there with P.O. Joseph, and I'm sorry, either trade Nick Leddy or have him as a healthy scratch.
Hard part is you want to try and compete still, and Nick Leddy, despite how bad he started this season, Nick Leddy was one of your best defensemen last season, and you hope that when he's healthy, you could throw him back in. I mean, it is awesome if he's a third-pair defenseman playing the way that he did last year, and then you just rotate guys in and out in Kessel and P.O. Joseph.
I didn't think he was as great as we made him out to be last year, to be totally candid. I thought he was really good a couple of years ago for the Blues. I don't think over the last couple of seasons, though, he's been quite as good as he was early on prior to signing the contract in St. Louis. I mean, he's, 33 years old? He doesn't have a future here in St. Louis.
His contract's up after this year, right? Or it's a modified no trade after this year? My guess would be you find a way to move off of that in the offseason, but you got to compete for a playoff spot right now, and if you fall out of it, you're right. I think you do.
Do you think that you drop off so much by going from Nick Leddy to Matt Kessel that you're...
It depends on what Nick Leddy you're getting back. Because I thought Nick Leddy was not the god on defense that we've made him out to be last season.
Fine.
But Leddy and Parayko played a very crisp shutdown role when they needed to be. And if that's the Nick Leddy you get back after this injury, that's a significant improvement over Kessel or P.O. Joseph. If you get the Nick Leddy from the first 4 games... I'm with you. P.O. Joseph and Matt Kessel are playing all season.
I just feel like that's kind of lying to what... Not lying. I think that's going against what the stated goal for this season was, which is we're trying to build for the future. Yes, we would like to compete right now, but not at the expense of giving guys opportunities when they are deserving of those opportunities.
I just feel like you to compete, to build for the future, you have to give the competitiveness of a playoff series.
And I just don't know if Kessel falls into that. Like when we talk about
Kessel, I think is going to be a long-term third-pair defenseman for this team.
Yeah, and I just think when I think of third-pair defenseman, I don't know how much his growth is being stunted if he's in the press box. I think it's also, when we say third-pair defenseman, that also means you're probably a guy that could also be a 7th defenseman on a team. So he's not the guy that if Bolduc's the guy that I look at and I say, man, when they were pulling him out of the lineup for Kapanen, that's where I said, okay, this never made sense. And we were in line on that one. I don't know if I feel that way about Kessel or P.O. Joseph if one of them gets pulled for Nick Leddy.
I just feel like Nick Leddy is not a part of this team's future. And if he's not going to be a part of this team's future, I'm not going to be pulling somebody out of the lineup that I think is a part of the future. And I might just be higher on Matt Kessel than others are. That's very, very fair. I think he's a really solid player. I remember last year we were having conversations and people were saying he's a future top 4 defenseman. I was like, whoa, let's reel it in a little bit. I do think he's a part of the future, but I think it's probably on the third pair long term. And I was pushed down because of that. Now I'm propping him up, and it's crazy how these things change so quickly. Yeah. But I think Matt Kessel is a part of this team's future. I do not think Nick Leddy is a part of the team's future, and I would be playing them accordingly. I think I would try to trade Nick Leddy. That would be my move, but it goes back to the no trade clauses.
Death taxes and another Blues player getting traded by BK.
I don't think people are as upset about this one.
No, they're not. They're not.
This one, people
but just
might be
death
more on
taxes
board
and another Blue getting traded.
He's Alex, this T-Bone on BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get those questions in. Coming up next is NFL Quick Hitters, including that conversation about Russell Wilson. How are we going to remember his time in Denver? Because I don't know how you guys felt. The last 2 games that I've seen him in the starting lineup for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I got to eat some crow. He's been phenomenal for them. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here at the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they visit the Ottawa Senators. Well, pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 6 with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. This portion of our update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, with Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Time for some NFL quick hitters. Alex, as I was watching the game last night, I thought to myself, man, I could not have been more wrong about this decision to go to Russell Wilson.
Same.
He's been really good. I mean, no qualifiers necessary. The guy has just played some really good football since being reinserted into the lineup for the Steelers. Took a little bit of time last night, but that throw down the sideline to George Pickens looks like a man that has a new lease on life right now. He looks like he's trying again, which is a sad state of affairs for the fact that he wasn't trying previously, but also a good sign for the Steelers because that guy is wildly talented when he is motivated. Alex, I saw somebody post this on Twitter. Aaron Schatz of, I think it's FTN Fantasy is where he works now. And he posted, are we going to remember Russell Wilson's years in Denver the way that we do Kurt Warner's seasons in New York with the Giants? Kurt Warner spent the 2004 season in New York. He had previously been hurt for the last couple of years with the St. Louis Rams. Before that, of course, MVP. I'm not sure there's ever been or ever will be another career quite like Kurt Warner's, but multi-time MVP, hurt, injuries, not the same dude, goes to New York to be basically a placeholder before Eli Manning takes over with the Giants after they had selected him de facto with the number 1 overall selection. And then he leaves as a 34-year-old, goes to Arizona, has a few years where he's a backup there behind, I believe it was Carson Palmer, if I'm not mistaken, and then takes over and goes to the Super Bowl with the Cleveland Cardinals. His year in New York was completely forgettable. Alex, are we going to get there with Russell Wilson if he ends up having a second act, either with the Steelers or with another team beyond?
Absolutely. I mean, I am the same boat as you. I thought Russell Wilson was going to be a disaster in Pittsburgh because you saw the end of it. The year he left Seattle was the downfall of Russell Wilson. You had the weird antics off the field that was just like, what's going on? Now, and look, I know it's only 2 games and things can go quick. Look at Sam Darnold with Minnesota. It's fallen off a little bit. But I think this is more about... This says more about the Denver Broncos and how bad they are run than it does Russell Wilson right now. So it does feel like you're just going to forget about those 2 years in Denver. If he has success with Pittsburgh, if it's just this year and then goes elsewhere, or if he finishes his career with Pittsburgh and has success, it's going to be Seattle, Pittsburgh, and then the trivia question is going to be, what third team did Russell Wilson play for in his NFL career? And the Denver Broncos are going to fly under the radar.
Let's pump the brake, everybody. Russ ain't back. He ain't cooking still.
He sure looks
played
like he
good.
is.
You know why he's
Cooking
played
his
good?
first
You know
couple
why
games.
it looks like we're going, hey, Russ is cooking in Pittsburgh, guys. It's because he played the 2 New York teams who suck. Like, let's just be honest about it.
Okay.
He's not back. Russ is still not one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. And I don't even think he's still in the top, 15, top 20.
When is he going to come back to earth, though? Because let me read you out their schedule. They're about to head into their bye. They're 6-2. Steelers are making the playoffs. We can all agree on that, right?
I agree with that.
Here's their upcoming games. You tell me where you think he's going to run into a bunch of trouble with what the opposing defenses are giving him, all right? The Washington Commanders.
There. Washington defense is
It's fine. It's not
better than the 2 New York teams.
I'm not sure it's better than the Jets. In fact, I think it is not better than the Jets.
I think they're the Spider-Man memes.
I think the Commanders have a
then.
bad defense.
Yeah, the next one is worse.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Tell me about how
Baltimore.
great the Baltimore Ravens defense is right now.
They'll be able to stop Russ.
Okay. After
I
they gave
think-
up 31 against Tampa and last week 29 against Cleveland, their defense stinks. They can't stop anybody through the air.
I do think they're...
We only look at them as a good defense because of what they've been in their history. This defense this season so far has not earned that respect.
I do think they're going to cause problems for Russell Wilson to where he's going to have to he's going to have to pull the magic wand out to escape out of the pocket with their rush. I think
Maybe.
Baltimore is going to make it at least more difficult than the Jets or the Giants did. Or the Commanders.
I think, again, it's pretty similar. So let's go beyond that. Cleveland.
No.
All right, well, he can cook there.
Cincinnati.
No.
Cleveland.
No.
Philly.
No.
Baltimore again. And then Kansas City. And I do think, as you guys know, I'm a honk.
He'll cook in that one.
I actually do think
Pittsburgh.
the Steelers will beat. I think the Steelers will beat the Chiefs on Christmas Day. A lot of people have been wondering, hey,
Merry Christmas
can
to
this Chiefs
you,
team?
right?
I mean, it's on like 4 days rest. Chiefs are playing in Pittsburgh on Christmas Day. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're probably not going to be highly motivated to win that game.
But let me paint you a different picture. Kansas City Chiefs are still undefeated.
Yeah, they're going to lose.
Pittsburgh Steelers.
That will be the game. I've already predicted it. The Chiefs will lose on Christmas Day, and even if it's their first loss, that will be a game that they do not win.
Sorry.
And Russell Wilson will throw for 275 against
Sorry,
them,
Luca.
with 3 touchdowns.
Daddy's in his room. He's not coming out until the next day. Daddy's not coming out till December 26th.
We can't celebrate
already
Christmas.
prepared 12 to 10 Christmas Day. That's what you're getting. You
I
won't
have to
like
watch
it.
the NBA if that's the
I won't
game.
be watching
That's what
that
you're
one.
I do think it is a bit premature to talk about this as like, Russell Wilson's back. He's going to be the. I think this offense fits him better than I expected it to.
See, I feel like this says more about Mike Tomlin and just the Steelers in general than it does Russell Wilson. Like, he's taken 2 quarterbacks that other teams are like, nope, these guys are trash. And I know Justin Fields wasn't great, but he was good enough to keep a team's head above water. And then Russell Wilson steps in. And then, again, I know he's not an MVP, but he looks as if he's a competent quarterback to where 2 years in Denver, he looks like trash.
Top 20 quarterback in the NFL. That's what he looks like.
I'm impressed by Mike Tomlin. That man should never be fired.
He's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. All right, continuing along with some NFL quick hitters here in BK and Ferrario. Which team currently under 500 do you guys believe is most likely to make the playoffs? I'll list you a few here. The Bengals, they're 3-5. God, Bengals, come on. Let's go, boys. The Rams, they're 3-4. The Browns, they're 2-6. Or the Cowboys, who just lost another infuriating game on Sunday Night Football. Which of those teams do you guys think is most likely to make it to the postseason this year?
I'll let our boy T-Bone cook.
Whose house? It's the Rams. I mean, they're in the weakest division out of all those teams that you said, outside of like Cincinnati and Cleveland. But even then, you still got to go through Baltimore and somehow Pittsburgh. But I think it's the Rams. Now that they are healthy, now we'll see if that health stays. But they're starting to get reinforcements on the O-line. You've got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back. Kyron Williams looks fantastic. And Matthew Stafford's been playing good football. And defensively, look, they're not great defensively, but they do have Verse, who's getting to the quarterback. He hasn't gotten the sack numbers to show up. I think at some point that's going to kind of go back into his favor, and he'll start to rack up the sacks. I think it's the Rams. I think they're going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to win 10 games and make the playoffs.
I think it's the Rams too. I think that division.
Really?
I think that division and that just conference in itself allows for more openings for the playoff spots.
You sure about that? Because let me read you the final 3 teams currently in the AFC's playoff race.
Well, the AFC's just.
So the Steelers, as of today, are the 3 seed.
I hate watching
5 seed today is the Denver Broncos.
And I mean, at least I can look at Denver and pick a reason why they're in that spot. Their defense.
6 seed Baltimore, that makes sense. 7 seed the Chargers at 4-3. 8 seed the Colts at 4-4. 9 seed is Cincinnati at 3-5. I think Cincy's the answer. I think they're getting one of those final. I think that final spot in the AFC where it's the Chargers, Colts, Broncos, Ravens. One of those spots I believe will belong to the Cincinnati Bengals.
But I
have no. If you ask me, hey BK, what have you seen from them so far this season that would indicate they will be a playoff team?
Go BK.
I have nothing. I have nothing to give you other than I trust Joe Burrow. I trust when T. Higgins is back and Jamar Chase is out there with him, they will have a top 5 to 7 offense in the NFL. But I have very little evidence of that other than basically the game against Baltimore, which they still lost because their defense is awful. But I think they'll eventually get to 9 wins, and I think that's enough this year in the AFC.
I can't point to that. I mean, you're right. Somebody's going to get into that AFC that's just trash. The Rams realistically can still win the NFC West.
Hell yeah.
Oh, 100%.
And that's how they get into the playoffs in a decent seed, because now that if they get healthy, they've got their offense. They're the better team when healthy, right there with San Francisco, at least offensively, because I don't know what San Francisco's going to look like when they come back.
You guys tell me real quick as we go down this list from the Bengals where the losses are on the schedule, okay? Raiders.
I would hope not.
Yeah, if they lose that one,
Baltimore on the road.
that's a loss.
Chargers on the road.
I think they could lose
I
that
think
game.
they could
I'll
lose
say
that one.
loss.
Yeah, that's a
Let's
deep,
call it a win, just to keep this going.
Shocker.
Wait, hold on. We're
Yeah.
pointing this in. You're
Shocker.
not
We're playing a
2 to
big
3.
game.
Let's call this
All
a
right, well, after
loss.
this one, let's play my Rams game.
Yeah, let's go through the Rams schedule right now.
Steelers at home.
I think
loss.
I think
That's a
I
loss.
think loss.
That's a win. You just talked about Russell Wilson.
Stop. Okay.
That's a loss.
Cowboys on the road.
Oh, that's a
That's
win.
a win.
They
That's
can't
a
win
win.
at home. The
Titans
Cowboys
on the road.
That's a win.
Cleveland at home.
That's a win.
Denver at home. Don't.
Might be a
That's
loss.
a win.
I think the Denver game's more 50-50.
I think it's a win.
I can't point
and then
the
Steelers on the road. Win. Boom.
See,
This game is awful. This game is terrible.
Here's where
12-5.
we had this conversation yesterday about Joe Burrow. I don't remember what the question was. I think it was which quarterback do you trust or which quarterback strikes fear in you? And the answer is, I've seen Burrow make Mahomes bleed. Guys, he's had his weapons, and Burrow's still not playing good football. Matthew Stafford beat the San Francisco 49ers with, here's the wide receiver core.
By that?
With Tutu Atwell, DeMarcus Robinson, and Jordan Whittington.
I'm a little impressed.
Stafford.
Bennington.
What?
Bennington.
No, Whittington.
Oh, that's what we call him when he wins games.
You get it.
Stafford's been playing good football without his two best wide receivers in an offensive line that can't block.
Let's be fair here. A week ago, they were talking about trading Cooper Kupp because the team had no future.
I thought that was ridiculous, by the way.
Let's play BK's game with the Rams. Rams Seahawks. Win. Rams Dolphins. Win. Patriots. Win. Eagles. Win. Saints. Win. Bills. 49ers. Jets. No, it's BK's game, though. Come on. Come on.
I don't see a loss on that schedule.
There's not a loss on this schedule.
Okay. Wow. Well, maybe it's the Rams and the Bengals. Maybe it's one in each conference. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers is coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and it is time to unlock your inner champion. The place to do so is at Victory Men's Health. Go ahead and check them out today, victorymenshealth.com. When you get there, the website is super easy to navigate, whether it's low testosterone, weight loss goals that you've been trying to meet on your own, you need a little bit of help with it, maybe it's erectile dysfunction. You can check them out, victorymenshealth.com, to unlock your inner champion. When you do so, click on the Book Now tab. It's easy to book your first appointment. All you got to do, put in your name, number, tell them a little bit about yourself, and tell them BK sent you to Victory Men's Health. Tell them you heard about them over on 101 ESPN. Victory Men's Health, when you walk through the door, one of their 4 great locations in the St. Louis area. It's a beautiful setup. This is not going to be one of those dimly lit, feels like you're kind of walking into a hospital, low-rate clinics. That's not what Victory Men's Health is all about. They want you to walk in the door and feel comfortable talking to everybody that is there to help you out and to unlock your inner champion. They did it for me. They can do it for you as well. Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Normally, this kind of question we would get for Ask Us Anything, but that's a different segment. That's not until Friday. It's going to be too late by then, so we'll answer it right here from the 636. Fellas, my girlfriend wants me to dress up in a costume to go trick-or-treating with her and her little sister on Halloween night.
Oh my God,
How do I get out of it?
Oh, well, I can help you there.
Is it a serious relationship? Because you don't get out of it.
That's all the info we got.
I think you're getting the flu bug, my friend. That's what I think.
I think Alex is right. I think you got to make a decision here.
Yeah.
Are you actually invested in this relationship?
Or you just want to...
Or is this just a fling?
Yeah.
If it's the latter, you can make up a million different excuses that can get you out of this thing. If it's the former, brother, you're going trick-or-treating. Congratulations. Enjoy that costume. That's it.
And unless it's like
goes,
a tandem costume, you could do this easily. Just do like with The Office. Put 3 little black circles on your shirt and your three-hole punch gym. Simple costume.
I think this is a pretty simple approach. You got to decide right now how invested you are in what it is that you're trying to do.
And it's not like you got to walk up to the door. You could just walk with them and let them walk to the door.
Honestly, trick-or-treating ain't that bad.
I assumed this was like going out to a party. That's what I was assuming. I guess it could be.
Trick-or-treating with a little sister.
Yeah, it's taking a little sister.
Yeah, you
Gotta get
go
out.
ahead, get yourself a tumbler.
There you go.
Get yourself some Pink Whitney if you're Alex, or if you're T-Bone, some Whiskey Coke. If you're me on a nice Halloween night, pour an Oktoberfest in there. Do whatever. Whatever you got to do, you know? But you can make this into a good evening.
Go get some candy, man. That's the best part about it.
Yeah.
And let's
Take
be
a
honest.
20% tax for everything that she gets.
How long do you actually go trick-or-treating?
Oh, it depends on how
I was
old she
saying
is. I mean,
probably
if
an
we're
hour.
out there for 45 minutes and then my daughters are done
Go out
with
there
it.
for an hour, go back home, hang out, boom. You did your good deed, get yourself a little brownie points. No harm, no foul. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, do you think that the Grand Slam walk-off in Game 1 was what deflated the Yankees? I do not. I think the Yankees, I don't think this is that they're deflated. I don't think this is a body language thing. I think this is a they're not as good as the Dodgers thing. They don't play good defense. They don't run the bases well. They're getting nothing out of Aaron Judge right now. When we add all of that up, their pitching it's leaky at a minimum. When you add all that up, they're just not as good as the Dodgers. So I think that's why they're losing this series. I don't think it's about the walk-off.
I agree with that, but that moment at least told every Yankees player that we might not be good enough as good as the Dodgers in this series. Like, it's not that it ruined the entire series, but boy, that takes all the confidence away from a group.
Yeah, I just don't think they were a good baseball team. I agree with that. But I do think that, to your point there, I think Game 1 was the game where it was, wow, we can't make a mistake. Because to beat the Dodgers, even though they are still a slightly flawed baseball team and that their pitching still is a little leaky, but it's not as bad as the Yankees, you've just got to play perfect baseball. And what did the Yankees do in Game 1? They had a lead. They have a ball that's thrown in by Juan Soto that gets away. Ohtani gets the third. Sac fly, it's tied. And now you have to go to extras. Now you got to go to your bullpen, got to go deeper into your bullpen, which leads to the Cortez decision. I think that was the game where they were like,
No doubt.
oh, crap, we've got to play flawless baseball, and they just haven't done that.
From the 217, Alex, what do you mix your Pink Whitney with?
Nothing.
I was gonna say, I don't
Do
know
you
what
mix
you
it
would
with
mix it
anything?
with.
It's
Yeah,
already
I don't think
mixed.
so.
It's tequila and pink lemonade.
Yeah.
Is it tequila?
Or not tequila, it's vodka and pink
right?
lemonade. Yeah. No, it's already mixed. I mean, you could chase it down with something if you want, but most of the time it's just a little sip and stroll, if you know what I mean.
There you go.
Somebody on the text line from the 636. There's no way Tanner's drink of choice is a whiskey and Coke.
Yeah. I'm
that
an
was
old man
mine.
at heart.
It's mine, man.
I like a whiskey and Coke,
See?
too. I also don't mind the Pink Whitney or the Oktoberfest.
Let's put them all in one tumbler and drink it all.
Oh, God, no. Absolutely.
That sounds-
Punishment idea!
I was saying, that sounds like a punishment.
That's
It's just not in the office, John. If you're listening, no alcohol in the building.
All right, I'm going to address this real quick from the 573 because we've had a number of different things on the text line, as you can imagine, about what's going on. From the 573, guys, what do you make of everything that's happening? Do you worry that you're next? We talked about this on Friday. If you want to hear our full thoughts on everything that took place on Friday, go back to the podcast. 101ESPN.com, free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
That's where I'm going to refer you back to. We can't keep talking about it each and every day on the show. I understand you guys are curious about it. I totally get it. Am I worried that we're next? Man, this is radio. I'm always worried that at any point in time, I could be gone. It's just the reality. Like, that's the truth of the nature of the business. Am I worried right now? I mean, not any more than I was yesterday. Not any more than I was a year ago. Like, I'm always concerned, though, about how long am I going to be able to do this? This is the way that I provide for my family. So, yeah, there's always a little bit of insecurities there. But this is how the business works. It stinks, but it's the truth. And so, yeah, that's where we're at. But, again, if you guys want to hear our full thoughts, I'm just going to refer everybody back to what we said on Friday. That's going to be the easiest way we do this because we just can't keep talking about it every day on the show. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. In about 15 minutes, we will play a game of Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. But next, Alex, as I was watching that series last night, the Dodgers versus the Yankees, I saw one player and I thought to myself, man, that's what I thought the Cardinals were getting. Tell you who that was, who it relates to next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care who have been making people comfortable since 1926. And if you're like me, I tried to hold out as long as possible, but now we've gotten to the point where you had to flip the heat on and keep it on consistently, unless days like today you turn it off, open the window up. But I've already had Classic Air Care out for the maintenance agreement to check out our older unit to make sure that it's good to go, make sure that it's fine-tuned, ready to get us through the season. And here's the thing. You call the company that has knowledgeable technicians. You call the company that is out there to take care of you, and they've been doing it with me since 2016. And they're reminding people that you've got a little bit time left before the government regulations kick in for the new HVAC systems beyond January 1st. Those new government regulations are going to up the prices of the units from 15 to 20% more expensive than what they're at right now. So still a few more months to get it in before those kick in, and you could get that purchase of a new HVAC system through Classic Air Care. All you got to do is give them a call, or you could schedule online for that appointment for them to come out. There's financing options for it as well. Check them out. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. Classic Air Care and classicaircare.com.
Alex, I thought when the Cardinals traded for Paul Goldschmidt, they would be getting what we have seen so far from Freddie Freeman. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. This is not to completely diminish what the Cardinals were able to get. out of Paul Goldschmidt. Goldie was a good player here. He was not what Freddie Freeman has been with the Dodgers. Freddie Freeman has played 3 seasons with the Dodgers. He started there, 32 years old? Is that right? Was Freddie Freeman's first season there? In the regular season in those 3 years, he has averaged a .315 batting average, an on-base percentage of 400, and a slugging percentage of 520. If you're a nerd like me, that's a 155 OPS plus. In other words, to simplify things, he's 55% above league average offensively. That's unbelievable what he's been able to do. And the craziest part, Alex, he's not a guy that overly relies on home runs. He's like consistently a 25-ish home run hitter, but he's hitting 50 doubles every season. And I thought that's what Paul Goldschmidt was going to be here. The thing that really stands out, though, is not just the regular season numbers, because you can look back on it, and Goldie won an MVP here. So he did have a truly historically great season. And in his second, third, and fourth years, it's like 55% above league average as well. What's really standing out about Freddie Freeman and what he's done in a Dodgers uniform versus what Paul Goldschmidt did in a Cardinals uniform is the postseason success. You look at what Freddie Freeman has done as a postseason player, postseason performer for the Dodgers, you can't ask for anything more. This year in the postseason, specifically, you look at the World Series, it's each of the first 3 games he's hit a home run. The only other 2 players that have ever done that, first 3 games of a World Series, hit a home run in each of them, are Barry Bonds. He did it in 2002. T-Bone, he's the best baseball player ever. Cheese. And Hank Bauer back in 1958. Among players that were clean and played baseball, he's the first guy to do this in the last 70 years, Alex. Do you look at that comparison at all? Do you care about the comparison between Freeman and Goldie and what the Cardinals did get out of Goldie and what the Dodgers are getting out of Freddie Freeman? Or do you just kind of wipe it away and say, different players, different situations, don't care about it?
There's a little of that. Like Freddie Freeman just seemed like he was on a different level than Paul Goldschmidt when both went to their new teams. But
oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know why. And maybe it's just because I'm looking at both of their numbers, and I mean, pretty identical in terms of their first tenure with Arizona and with Atlanta. It's just a different...
Yeah, they were almost the exact same.
It's just a different aura that I felt with Freddie Freeman, and maybe it is the postseason success with Freddie Freeman, even when you were talking about being with the Atlanta Braves prior to, and then Paul Goldschmidt with the Arizona Diamondbacks. But I also look at Paul Goldschmidt, and look, he's part of the problem with the Cardinals and their postseason success, but I look at the surrounding cast with Freddie Freeman and the surrounding cast with Paul Goldschmidt. So where it's like, yes, Freddie Freeman has been unbelievable in this postseason, but when he needs a pick-me-up in the previous series, when I know he was dealing with an injury, but when you need a pick-me-up, you have the next guy that steps up for that Dodgers team. And where the Cardinals, they had 2 guys since Paul Goldschmidt has been here. It was he and Nolan Arenado, and one was supposed to carry the torch. The other was supposed to carry the torch. They never built a roster that was the way of, hey, if this guy falters a little bit, we've got a safety net behind him. And the Dodgers at least have put the safety nets with Mookie Betts this season with Shohei Ohtani, and they've had all these unsung heroes that have come up. So I do judge Paul Goldschmidt's time in St. Louis based off of that postseason success, but I don't place all of the blame on him because I don't feel like they put the best roster that they could around those players when they were having the seasons.
I blame some of their playoffs lack of success on him. I think he needed to be better, man. You look at what he's been. Now, that first year that he was here, when they went to the NLCS, he was pretty good in that postseason. But since then, it hasn't been good enough. And he's had way too many opportunities to come through when he didn't. He failed to come through over the last, and it's a small sample size, I understand, but part of it is small because of his lack of success. In his last 6 games in the postseason for the Cardinals, he's 4 for 23, which is a 175 batting average. That's not good enough, man. You needed more out of Paul Goldschmidt. And if you got more out of him, if he was more successful at the plate, you would have had more games for him to be able to come up big in big key moments. Freddie Freeman, as a Dodger, has an OPS of 830 in the postseason. That changes things, man. And when you surround him, of course, Alex, you're right. We surround him with Mookie Betts and now Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, you're going to get a lot more opportunities to play because you've got dudes that'll step up even in those games when you do struggle. But I just thought you were going to get more than what they did, especially in the postseason. But this goes back to really their entire histories. I think Freddie Freeman and Paul Goldschmidt, when you look back at the back of the baseball cards, the end of their respective careers, you're going to see them be remarkably similar. Both of them have an MVP. Both of them played first base. Both of them did so well. Super likable, did all the things right. Like, nobody's got anything bad to say about either of those two players. Regular season numbers are remarkably similar. The one thing that will stand out that is a key difference between the two is Freddie Freeman was on a World Series team as one of the best players, if not the best player, with Atlanta. And he's going to potentially be the MVP this year in the World Series again for the Dodgers. That's the difference between the two. So they're both going to be Hall of Famers. Freddie Freeman's going to go down as having a better career.
Yeah, and to your point on, Paul Goldschmidt not having a ton of games, especially in the last 3 postseason runs, and it does tie to his lack of success. I just looked this up in his time with St. Louis. You know what he batted in elimination games? So you had the 1-game wild card.
Goldie.
Yeah, you had the 1-game wild card. You had, of course, Game 2 against Philly. You had the 4th game against Washington tied into the 1 game against the Dodgers. 1 for 14, 8 strikeouts.
Oh.
Now, I did have a couple of walks in there, so he was getting on base.
That's
but when
terrible.
you're the 3-hole or 2-hole, wherever he was hitting in those playoff runs, you can't be 1 for 14 with 8 strikeouts.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's why you're going home early, and he doesn't have the playoff moment that you can circle, right? Why does Freddie Freeman have the grand slam that we can always go back and look on if they end up closing out this World Series? Well, it's because he got to the World Series. He's on the biggest stage, and he's able to come through and he performs. You don't have that moment for Paul Goldschmidt ever.
The other thing is you always feel like Freddie Freeman's coming through.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't always come through, but you always feel that he is going to. And if you've got a righty on the mound, good luck. And I feel that way in the regular season with Goldie, with lefties on the mound. If you got a lefty on the mound, you're going up against Paul Goldschmidt during his prime, good luck, dude. It's game over for you. You got no chance. Get into the postseason, though, I don't know. It becomes a different game for him, and I truly do believe there are certain players that elevate their games when they get into the postseason, and others that struggle with the moment. I think we might be seeing Aaron Judge as one of those guys, where he gets into his head. I can't explain it. It doesn't make sense to me. Kike Hernandez is the opposite. Kike Hernandez lives for October. Tommy Edman appears to live for the month of October. He just raises his game to another level. I think there are certain guys, I don't know what it is. I don't have enough background in like the specific swing techniques to be able to explain this to you, but I'm sure there are people that are more well-educated in it that could. I can't explain why this is the case, but I think there are certain guys that have holes in their swings that are exposed once you get to this point in the season. Tommy Edman has a very simple swing. He makes a lot of contacts, regular season, postseason. Aaron Judge appears right now to have a swing and miss problem. And I don't know what it is specifically that they have found in his swing, but he's 1 for 12 with 7 strikeouts in the World Series, and he's 6 for 43 with 20 strikeouts so far this postseason. That's an Aaron Judge problem. We can talk all we want to about the Yankees' deficiencies with their defense, their base running, everything else. Dude, ultimately, Aaron Judge isn't hitting. And their team is constructed in a way where if Aaron Judge doesn't hit, they can't win. Just like the Cardinals. The Cardinals got to the postseason with Goldie and Arenado, and it became very simple. We can talk about all these moves, managerially speaking. We can talk about the defense. We can talk about the pitching. We can talk about all these different things until we're blue in the face. Ultimately, it came down to this team is constructed where if Goldie and Arenado hit, we win. If Goldie and Arenado don't hit, we don't win. And those two didn't hit for the Cardinals. Right now, Aaron Judge isn't hitting for the Yankees.
Yeah, well, and you said it earlier, like some guys just aren't able to perform on a big stage like that, and that's Aaron Judge. I don't know why, and frankly, that's got to be a really tough situation if you're the Yankees because that's the face of your franchise. That's the guy that is supposed to carry you to the promised land, and now this postseason, as great as it probably has been for Yankees fans, unless they get swept, then it's going to really stink. You're going to exit out of this postseason run talking about Giancarlo Stanton, who I don't know if you're going to hope that that's going to happen again, and Juan Soto, who might not be here beyond this season. You're not even speaking of Aaron Judge. So this felt a lot like, and I know we only saw it for a really small sample size, this kind of felt like what Tyler O'Neill was in St. Louis, where you had that MVP season-esque season, I should say, and then when you got to that postseason.
You can see the difference, though, right? I mean, Aaron Judge is one of the all-time great baseball players that we've ever seen. Tyler O'Neill had a good season.
Totally, but I'm only going off of watching somebody who can perform in the regular season and couldn't perform in the postseason.
It feels to me, it's a cross-sport comparison, but I mentioned this before the show today, T-Bone, to you. It feels to me like Peyton Manning. And I think there will come a point in time where Judge is overcoming this. Just as, honestly, A-Rod. A-Rod's another similar conversation here, where A-Rod was a choke artist early in his career. We don't talk about the fact that A-Rod was a big part of why they ended up winning the World Series, because people hate him and because of who A-Rod is. But they don't win that World Series without Alex Rodriguez doing what he did in the postseason. He ended up becoming a really key postseason performer. I think there will come a point in time where Aaron Judge overcomes this stuff, because the Yankees are going to be good. They're going to get back here, I believe, at some point in his career. But right now, I think this is doing such damage to his reputation as a playoff performer that much like Peyton Manning, who ended up going to and winning multiple Super Bowls in his career and ended up actually having a winning record head-to-head against Tom Brady. When they played against one another, Peyton won more often than he lost against Tom Brady. Nobody remembers it that way because everything was judged based on what happened early in his career. Peyton was viewed as the choke artist that can't win the big one. And it didn't matter what happened from there. And I think that's what Judge is going to be stained with. There's going to be a scarlet letter that is, hey, this guy doesn't perform in October, no matter what happens from here, right or wrong.
Yeah, I think he'll be stuck with that until he has the moment. And, you know, you asked me a question in the office. Well, Manning had his Super Bowl, so why is that Manning still is viewed that way? There's no Tom Brady in baseball. Unless it becomes like Ohtani, and Ohtani continues to play well. But he'd almost have to go, like, the Dodgers have to go on an unbelievable run for that
baseball
to occur.
Also isn't viewed as much as like a 1 versus 1, like hitter versus hitter type
and there's
of
not
game.
and there's not like the one position really determines the fate of a franchise like the quarterback position does. He needs the big moment, and I thought he had in Cleveland. Remember, he had the big home run in that game. I don't remember which game it was in the ALCS against the Guardians.
It's a game they lost, right?
Yeah, I think they ended up giving up the walk-off home run. It goes 10 innings or something. They give up the home run. I think it was the Christmas game where he came through. That was his moment, and it gets forgotten because they lose that game. Well, his nickname's Christmas or whatever, but yeah, but that was the moment for him that you could look back on and go, there's Aaron Judge's postseason moment. But then it got erased, and until he has that moment in a World Series or in a World Series run for the Yankees, you're right. I mean, he's going to be viewed as the biggest choke artist probably in baseball in this decade.
I don't know if that'll be justified, but
I mean, I think it's justified. Look at his numbers. He's not good in October.
What I'm saying is if we end up getting to a place where he does come through in October, I think he's still going to be remembered that way. I think that it's really hard to wash off the stench of this kind of a postseason. And this many of these. This is not the first time that we've seen Judge come up short in the postseason. This has been a consistent theme throughout his career.
I think it can be washed off because in baseball, what makes it so interesting with the Manning one is why is it remembered that Manning was always the choke artist when he got to the playoffs? Well, it's not just because there was this guy named Tom Brady. It's because Tom Brady won 7 rings.
How's Clayton Kershaw remembered?
I think he's a choke artist, but he hasn't won a World Series, and he's not a part of the staff this year.
Other than 2020, but 2020's not a World Series.
I don't think 2020 really
Yeah, but you don't think 2020 is a World Series for him.
Yeah, but that doesn't fit my argument.
Yeah, see?
Hold on, this is back to the Bengals winning every game.
Clayton Kershaw deserves to go down as a choke artist when it comes to October because he's never had the October moment that I can still circle.
I think if Judge finishes his career in this conversation, then you're right. But if all he needs to do is have one World Series moment and you forget about all of the bad behind it.
Yeah, and that's where I am. Unlike, there's not somebody else that I can point to in baseball and say, Ohtani came through for like 10 postseasons. He's walking away with 5 rings. Now, maybe that's possible. That guy's a unicorn. But you could say that in football for Peyton Manning. You could look at his rival and go, well, Tom Brady doesn't. He's won 6 Super Bowls for crying out loud with New England. It's different for Judge. He gets 1 World Series title, and he's the reason for that World Series title. Yeah. It's a lot easier to just kind of erase what had happened in the past and go, hey, Judge did this. I mean, look at baseball. There's such parity in the league that I don't remember the last back-to-back World Series champion. So that's why.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in 15 minutes, Martin Kilcoyne was able to sit down with John Mozeliak, answered a couple of key questions. One about the ownership situation. Is there a potential sale in the future? He asked him directly about that. We'll let you hear what John Mozeliak had to say about that coming up in 15 minutes. He also asked about the direction of the team. What is the plan for next year? Can he simplify that for fans? What is the plan for the 2025 season? You'll hear from Mo in 15 minutes. Better to forget it coming up next here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. Guys, bet it or forget it. Caleb Williams will win a Super Bowl during his rookie contract before, or at least appear in a Super Bowl. Let me amend that. Caleb Williams will appear in a Super Bowl before Jaden Daniels does.
I'm going to forget it. I think Jaden Daniels has that it factor, and I think he's the one that gets there before Caleb Williams does.
T-Bone, you told us that the first one to make a Super Bowl in that
Mac
2021 class was Mac Jones, so I don't know how much I value your opinion on this, but I'm going to let you
liked
answer
Bryce Young,
otherwise.
too, so.
Wow. First off, we didn't have to bring that back up.
Short king, am I right?
Second off, there was such a tone problem in that it wasn't even funny.
Coming from the guy.
Third, Brandon. I'm going to say, oh, man, I think I'm going to bet it. I think Jaden Daniels is probably the better quarterback right now. I also think his roster's a little further away. And I think when you look at the Bears, you've got Adunze, you've got DJ Moore locked up. They've got, who is it, Sweat is the one that they signed to the extension on as an edge rusher. Like, there's the pieces that are in place now, and it's kind of, okay, sure, there are some adjustments that need to be made. And I also think Caleb's going to take his game to the next level the more and more he kind of matures in the NFL. I think Washington's a couple more years away from really hitting their window. I think they're ahead of schedule, but I will say bet it. Chicago Bears will get there first.
I'm betting it as well. And I think part of this is because I really have a open-ended question as to whether or not Matt Eberflus is going to be there long term. I think they're going to end up replacing him at some point during the Caleb Williams rookie deal. And if so, dude, this is the best possible coaching job that'll come open. You got Caleb Williams on a rookie contract with all the talent that T-Bone was just mentioning in a big market, a football-crazed town. That would be a team that a lot of people would like to coach. Like, legit, like Ben Johnson. If it became available this offseason, the Bears job, Ben Johnson would probably listen to that job as opposed to some of the other ones that he's been like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and stay here as the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator.
And how funny is it that he turned down the Washington job now, looking at a 2020 hindsight?
I think it worked out potentially for both sides, though. Dan Quinn's done a good job there so far. So I'm going to bet it. I do think Caleb Williams ends up. I love Jaden Daniels. You guys know that. But I think the situation's a little better right now so far in Chicago. Alex, what do you got for us?
Guys, last season, the Blues' goals from their defensemen was at 23. Bet it or forget it. They surpassed that this year.
More than 23 goals from their defensemen?
From their defensemen. Right now, they've got 5.
I'll say bet it just because they seem to be really getting involved offensively more than they did last year. I know that was something that Bannister talked about a lot after he was hired. So I'll say bet it, but I don't think it's going to be overwhelmingly so. I don't think they have a bunch of guys that just have these great shots defensively. I just think they're a little more involved. So I'll say bet it, not by a lot.
I think I'll bet it as well. I'm kind of with you. I think it'll be a little bit more than it was a year ago, but not by a ton. But I will bet it. They are better offensively as a defensive group.
3 years ago, they had 49. That's not going to happen. Falk had 16 that year. That was the year he put up like 47 points.
Who do you think leads the team defensively? Among the defensemen, who do you think leads the team in goals this year?
Broberg or Parayko?
Parayko's out here playing like he's a damn forward.
Which I
literally standing in front of a net.
I'm going to have to ask Bannister this next time I'm at a skate, but I wonder if they tell him to do that. I mean, because last year he did that a little bit towards the end of the season, too. We saw earlier this year against Minnesota.
It makes
Minnesota,
sense.
the puck rolled off his stick when he was standing in front of the net. I really think they told him, like, hey, man, you go in on the rush because now you've got Ryan Suter, who's the weak side D. He'll stay out and play. Go be a forward. Like, Dustin Byfuglien did this.
Go do what he did.
Dustin Byfuglien did this when the Blackhawks, well, he was a forward, but he was really a defenseman. When the Blackhawks won their first cup, they basically said, like, hey, Byfuglien, go be a forward. Because you're big, and go stand in front of the net. Yeah. See if somebody will beat you.
Take advantage of the size. Because he doesn't want to use a shot. We know that. At this point,
I don't know if they want him to use his shot.
Yeah,
because they're worried it hurts.
Turnovers going, not turnovers, but it leads to rushes going the other direction, and it can potentially, like, it's just, the risk is not worth the reward a lot of the times. What you do have in Colton Parayko is a behemoth of an individual who, if he's standing in front of the net, can create space there. He knows how to utilize his size. It does make a lot of sense. The only comparison that I can think of in terms of like across sport, it's like some teams will invert their coverages where they'll have their safeties go down and then their corners end up like rotating. You see Spags do this. You'll probably see some breakdowns from the football nerds that show you like, hey, Spags went from a cover 2 to a cover 1, and then it like went back to a cover 2. That's kind of what the Blues are basically doing with their spacing and the way that they're utilizing Colton Parayko right now. It's really cool.
I don't know if it's outlandish to say. I think you could have 3 defensemen with double-digit goals.
Parayko, Broberg, and Falk.
I mean, Broberg's the one that you just don't know, but he's got 2 in 9 games. Falk did it 2 years ago in back-to-back years, and Colton Parayko had 10 goals last season.
Yeah, and Parayko's going to park himself in front of the net. I like his chances.
That's how you win a Norris right there.
Yeah. Guys, bet it or forget it. Jake Neighbors, who leads the team in goals so far this season with 4, will finish top 3 in goals scored on the St. Louis Blues.
Bet it. I'm going to stick with what I said originally. I think he could get you 30 to 35 goals.
What a fun player.
Yeah. I mean...
In the most simple way, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the part he's got to get going, which is not on him, it's the unit itself, is the power play. You guys know what Zach Hyman's doing right now?
I have zero
All
idea.
I know about the Oilers...
You don't watch the Edmonton Oilers, man?
There are 2 things I know about the Oilers. They are struggling, and Connor McDavid got hurt.
That's true. Hyman has 0 goals. 10 games
that guy
in.
was over.
Are you worried about it?
I don't think he's going to score 54 this season.
Well, no, but this is why I was skeptical on Jake Neighbors, is because of the nature of the way that they score goals.
See, the difference between Neighbors and Hyman is Hyman only scores that way. Neighbors, the other night, scored off of the rush.
I mean, Hyman does some of that. Like, we just don't see him every night. Hyman's a good player.
I mean,
my answer to the question of, like, am I worried about Zach Hyman is no. Well, I think he's going to be fine.
No, but I'm just... That's the type of player he is, but he's got a different weapon in his arsenal that I feel like, and that's why Neighbors is doing this.
I don't think... I'll say forget it. I don't think that Neighbors ends up top 3 on the team in goals by the end of the season. I think you will have Jordan Kyrou, Pavel Buchnevich, and then one other emerges, and I don't know who it's going to be.
Can I give you a little breaking news for Bet It or Forget It?
Please.
The Indianapolis Colts are benching former first-round pick Anthony Richardson and turning to veteran Joe Flacco. Bet it or forget it. Anthony Richardson is not a Colt after his rookie contract.
After his rookie contract, I'll bet it. I'm not out on Anthony Richardson.
They are.
I think they're out on him for right now.
They forget it.
So my thing that is holding me back the most, what he did pulling himself out of the game was inexcusable. That can't happen, dude. And you certainly can't admit it publicly because you've lost your teammates now. Everybody else out there is putting their body on the line, and as the quarterback, who is supposed to be the leader of the team, you come out and say, I was tired? Dude, everybody on your team is tired. Your receivers are running wind sprints, and you're trying to get their heads knocked off on every play because you have no accuracy right now. And you're leaving the field because you're tired? Unacceptable as a quarterback. It can't happen. You had to make this change right now. That being said, I've read some really smart people break this stuff down, and they think that Anthony Richardson is closer than it looks right now. I don't know. We'll see long term. I think it's entirely possible he could have a career similar to like Geno Smith, where you look back and you're like, man, all of the gifts, all of the talent was there. It just had to be, it had to be developed, and it took a little longer than what the Colts wanted. So I do think he's going to be their starting quarterback next year. I could get with this, though. I'll bet it that he's not there long term.
Yeah, I would bet he's not there long term. I just don't know. And maybe this comes with time, and maybe you're right. It could become kind of like Geno. He's got the arm talent. There's no denying that. But the accuracy is a little off, but that's something that you can work on. He's got to learn to read a defense, though. That's his biggest problem for me. I don't think he knows what he's seeing, and I think it's what's throwing off some of his accuracy. Is he thinks he's seeing, whether it be like, cover 0, and then all of a sudden it is cover 2, and then he panics and he doesn't hit his wide out. I think that's what's happening with Anthony Richardson, but I'll bet it. I don't think the Colts will stick with him in the long run.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. So you can't leave the field if you're tired. Running backs and receivers do it all the time. When was the last time you heard a quarterback say, I left the field because I was tired?
I've never heard it.
And he was tired because he was under duress the whole time. It's like, well, read the defense a little bit better, Anthony.
Yeah, get out of here.
Yeah,
all right.
you had to
Literally, get out of here.
Yeah.
Joe Flacco's coming in.
Yeah, we want Joe. I don't want to get political or anything, but that was for Joe Flacco.
We want Joe Flacco! We
Yeah!
want Joe Flacco!
Workshop that.
We want Flacco! We want... He should change his name to like a Flacco. Doesn't flow as well.
Is he going French now?
Yeah.
He's moving to Montreal.
Flacco.
All right, from the 314. Guys, bet it or forget it. The Blues will be buyers at this year's trade deadline. Alex, do I even need to send this to you?
Oh, he's going to bet it.
I mean, sure, I'll bet it. I don't even think they're going to buy. I don't know what there's going to be to buy for this
Martin
team.
H's. It'd be great.
Oh, man, you had the opportunity to do that. Trevor Zegras from Anaheim. Marcus Patterson from Pittsburgh. I've heard that he's going to be on the market. That's a left-handed defenseman. There's your top 4, boys. 2 Swedes on the left and a Canadian, a dude from Minnesota on the right.
That sounds like a Steen deadline if I've ever heard one.
I was really hoping Falk was Canadian for some reason.
I'll forget it because I don't know if they're going to be viewed as buyers. I also don't know if they're going to be viewed as sellers. I think what you could see from the Blues is a little bit above.
It was just, yeah.
Maybe they sell like a Letty Assad, and then maybe they see one player they like, and they say, let's take a flyer on insert player right here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I could see them doing.
Better to forget it. I think they're much more likely to be sellers than buyers at the deadline, especially Robert Thomas is out for 6 weeks, potentially longer. We don't know what's going on with Mathieu Joseph. I think they're a decent team. I don't think this is going to be a year where they decide to.
This guy, am I right, ladies and gentlemen?
All right, from the 314, better to forget it, Cleveland will win at least 6 more games this season with Jameis Winston as their quarterback.
I'm not even going to look at their schedule. No way in hell.
I was looking at it. Like, they have at least some favorable games. I don't trust Jameis Winston, though. They're going to win off of Nick Chubb if he gets back to himself, which I think he was still on a reps limit in the last game. Forget it.
They've got New Orleans. They could win that game. Denver, they could win that game. Split with Pittsburgh, win one of those. Miami, no, forget it. I don't think there's 6 wins left on this schedule. I think there's 7-win team, 6 to 7-win team. I think had they made this flip earlier, you should have beat the Giants. You should have beat the Raiders. Probably should have beat Philly in that game as well. This should have been a playoff team this year, but they were so tied to Deshaun Watson because of the contracts that they willingly gave him. They couldn't make the move.
You know what they needed? Joe Flacco.
Should have kept him. Literally.
I forgot he was there.
Jameis Winston this week against Baltimore had more passing yards than Deshaun Watson had in his past 2 games combined against Philly and Cincinnati. Wow. It was a sad state of affairs for the Cleveland Browns and what they had with their passing game. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll dive into the junk drawer. But next, John Mozeliak answered a couple of pressing questions with Martin Kilcoyne. That's the full interview you'll be able to hear tonight on Fox 2. We've got a couple of cuts that we'll play for you next from John Mozeliak here on 101 ESPN. Alex, when I win money on sports betting, I want to win the most money possible. You know, I have my struggles sometimes with sports betting. Let's just be candid about it. So if I'm betting over on FanDuel, DraftKings, I'm not winning the most money possible. The place to do that is with Circa Sports in the state of Illinois. If you have not downloaded the app today or yet, you should do so today. It is time. You've been wasting money out there. When you win, you got to win the most money possible. The place to do so is with Circa. And for me, Alex, when I'm betting on this World Series game, I'm betting Aaron Judge to hit a home run and a Yankees win. I think this is the game where Yankees fans are like, all right, here it comes. And then they end up losing in 5. Plus 365 for that special prop that's available to you exclusively on Circa Sports in Illinois.
I got a parlay for you, ladies and gentlemen, on a Blues game tonight because the better odds are on the Blues as a money line. It's plus 340 on the Circa app. Elsewhere, it's only sitting at plus 210. So put that Blues money line and under 6 goals with Joel Hofer in between the pipes. That's going to pay you out $45 compared to those other sports betting apps where you're only bringing in $41. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Tanner Hendrickson here at the Sports Center. Update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they visit the Ottawa Senators. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 6 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. And according to Matt DeFranks, it looks like Joel Hofer will be in the starters net tonight. And also according to Mathieu DeFranks, as he reported yesterday, the Blues sent forward Mathieu Joseph back here to St. Louis to be further evaluated for a lower body injury, so he'll be out in tonight's matchup against his former team, the Ottawa Senators. This portion update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK in 10 minutes, we'll get into the junk drawer. John Mozeliak sat down yesterday, Alex, with Martin Kilcoyne of Fox 2, and they had a conversation about where the team's at right now, what the future holds for them, both in terms of the very near future and long term. And we were able to get our hands on a couple of these quotes from John Mozeliak. Again, these are courtesy of Fox 2. Shout out to Martin Kilcoyne for sitting down with John Mozeliak. You can hear Martin Kilcoyne now on TMA weekdays from 7 to 10. Their full show is 7 to 11. Kilcoyne's on at until 10 o'clock because, you know, when you're Martin Kilcoyne, that's what you can do in 3 hours instead of the 4.
Don't act like you don't do this, Mr. Mondays.
In your next
I'm out.
contract, are you going to get a 2-hour show?
In my next contract,
It'll be me and T-Bone for the final hour.
In my next contract, I just want a contract.
That's honestly fair.
Wait, hold on. Am I getting paid? Okay, we're good. We're good. That's fine. Sign it right now.
All right, so let's hear what John Mozeliak had to say. First, he was asked about the game plan. What is the plan for the Cardinals this offseason heading into next year? You'll first hear his answer, and then there's going to be a follow-up question for Martin that plays in here as well.
As we take a step back in the next couple of years in terms of like how we think about investing in our roster, it's not that we're not investing in the organization, though. We will be deploying resources down below. That's going to look like human capital. That's going to look like technology, innovation, and we're really going to push that so in the next couple of years, ultimately, the Cardinals can hit their stride and get back to where we once were, competing in October year in and year out.
Is that a nervous thing with the fans already a little bit restless that you're going to say, hey, we're not kind of going all in? I mean, it's a balance you guys have to walk
It's
here.
a balance, but
are you worried about fans supporting that mission, or?
I mean, I'm always worried in this job, but I would say I feel like the one thing you have to do is be honest. You have to be transparent in what you're doing. I think over the last few years, people have started to question that. And so I want our fan base to know that we're still excited about what we're going to see next year, but we're doing it differently. And there's no guarantees that we're going to be chasing that next shiny object out there.
I kind of appreciate that part of it. Like,
At least he gave you a little bit of honesty of what the direction is.
I'm still not entirely sure what it is.
Same, which is why that quote is so frustrating.
I do think, though, that their actions will tell us this offseason what the plan is. And I don't think right now it's smart for the organization to fully disclose what their plans are. And what I mean by that, Alex, is if they came out and said, we have to shed $50 million in payroll, every other team across Major League Baseball has them over a barrel. Because they now know there is a mandate from ownership as to how much they need to shed. And now if I'm another team, I'm not giving you anything of value. You have to move these players. I know you have to trade, basically, at that point, one of Nolan Arenado or Sonny Gray. You got to do it because you got to shed a ton of payroll, and those are the quickest way to be able to move on from some money from your books. So it doesn't make sense for them to come out and say something like that, even though it would feel good for all of us to be able to know that right now. We will know, I bet you, by January 1st. Generally speaking, what the direction is. And I think by winter warm-up, we will be able to ask that exact same question, and he will have a better answer for what the plan is. I just don't think it serves anybody inside of the organization right now to say that publicly. But what I do appreciate is what he said at the end there, which is, hey, listen, we want people to know we're probably not going to be in a place where we're really pushing for this season. And what that really effectively tells you is, hey, if we get to the trade deadline and we're close to a playoff spot, we're not going to be mortgaging the future to be able to really go all in. I think the Cardinals are going to be in a similar spot to where the Brewers have been at times over the past couple of years, where this year was different for them. They felt like they were a contender. Remember a couple of years ago when they traded Josh Hader at the deadline and they were in a playoff spot and then they fell out of a playoff spot? I think that's how the Cardinals are going to be operating right now. I also think you can use the Brewers as an example, though, as to why it doesn't have to be a full, like, oh, you sold off a few pieces, time to crumble. You win 60 games, lose 100 this year. Because look at what the Brewers have done over the past few years. They traded Josh Hader. They traded Corbin Burns. They didn't have, what is the other number one starter that they had?
Brandon Woodruff.
Yeah, they didn't have Woodruff this year. And they lose their all-world manager to an intra-division team with the Cubs signing him. They should have taken a step back. They're probably going to trade this offseason their all-world closer again. And guess what? I don't think it's going to matter. So I think the Cardinals could take a sizable step back in payroll this offseason, and you go into next year, and there will be lower expectations, and there should be. I don't think that means the team has to crumble, though.
No, I don't think it means they have to crumble either. I do think they have, and he's right, they have pieces that are exciting to be around. And watching these World Series, it doesn't have to mean that all of these pieces can't contribute to a winning mentality. I think the part that I'm still uncertain about is how you're filling those spots. Like, I know you've got a lot of the internal options, but we're still talking about the development of a lot of these guys. Like, you trade Nolan Arenado if you're able to. Yeah. That's great. And the excitement of Nolan Gorman's there. But we're still talking about developing the minor leagues and getting some of these guys so they're ready for the major leagues. What does that mean for this guy who was sent to the AAA last season? Jordan Walker gets everyday reps. It's exciting, yes, but the development is probably still going to be stunted. So it doesn't mean
we don't know that. This is where I'm going is, I think there's every bit as good of a chance that those guys end up working out as there is that they don't. I have no idea what it's going to look like next year for Nolan Gorman, because 2 years ago we loved him and last year we hated him. I have no idea what it's going to look like for Jordan Walker, who 2 years ago we loved and last year we didn't enjoy.
Yeah, but that's trending the wrong direction, where 2 years ago was great. Last year we're talking about minor league demotion.
That's baseball, though.
It's exciting, don't get me wrong, but it's concerning.
Sure, of course.
And I think the Brewers get the benefit of the doubt because they've done it. Like, what can I point to that I can tell the Cardinals, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you're going to trade these guys away, you're still going to be competitive.
Brewers
I've seen you do
these guys out.
And I haven't seen it from the Cardinals.
I think you have. I think you've seen the Cardinals churn out really good players, just not the stars. I think we've seen them have. I think they get underrated for how many solid position players they have. In fact, they've had too many of them and not enough of the stars. And that's been a big problem for them. Their bigger issue is the pitching side of things, but we don't have to go down that road once again. I think for next season, as I'm looking towards it, like, I do want to see Nolan Gorman playing every day. I want to see Jordan Walker play every day. Alex, one of the things that I enjoy about watching the Blues right now is that we're seeing that. We're seeing Zach Bolduc learn on the job. We're seeing what it looks like for Holloway and Broberg. And these guys are from the outside, but they're still very young. Mathieu Joseph getting a real opportunity here. Like P.O. Joseph getting an almost every night trial right now for the Blues. I think that's what next year is going to be for the Cardinals. And much like with the Blues, I don't anticipate them really pushing at the deadline to get a potential playoff spot. I think this year is about setting themselves up for future success. I think that's likely what next year will be for the Cardinals. I'm not entirely sure this team's going to take a sizable step back, even with the record, than what they were last year. Because Paul Goldschmidt was not a good hitter this year. Nolan Arenado, if he is traded, it's entirely possible Nolan Gorman next year outproduces what you got this year from Nolan Arenado. Get it for a 30th of the cost and potentially a better player at that position. I think it's very possible that Jordan Walker takes a huge step forward next year in his development and that you end up with a solid player with Thomas Saggese. Like, Ivan Herrera might just be a really good hitter, man. Might be a cleanup hitter for you next season. And you walk away and you're like, oh, Cardinals next year kind of had a Tigers type of season. I don't know if it will result in them getting to the postseason. Probably not. But could they win 84 games and you feel better at the end of the year than you did that you thought you were going to prior to? I think that's very possible.
I think it's possible as well, and that's where the excitement comes in because that's still the unknown for Cardinals fans. I think the difference with the Blues offseason is you saw those guys perform on other teams, and you still had the optimism of like, okay, well, they just did that. Broberg's a perfect example. You saw him perform in the Western Conference Final, Stanley Cup Final. You don't remember the woes of the regular season of him going up and down.
They existed.
They existed, but you saw the postseason, and it was on another team, and this is like this new shiny toy. I think the difference is for Cardinals fans, they've already seen these toys. You've already seen the Walkers and the Gormans and these guys that are here, and you're like, what's the upside? Because we saw it 2 years ago.
All-star caliber upside for both of them.
Totally. But they're still in the Cardinals system. Sure. And the Cardinals system, at least from what they're telling us and what fans have seen, is a flawed system.
They got a new hitting coach. I don't know how much that matters. Might matter some, though. They have John Jay around now. Don't know how much that's going to matter. It might matter a little bit. Even if it's 5%, that could potentially help you with a guy like Jordan Walker, who's really struggled to make himself an average plus defender in the outfield. I don't know what it's going to be like next year. I mean, the smart money is that you're right, Alex. Most baseball players that come through a system don't work out. Most of them. Even highly touted prospects. Jared Kelenic was supposed to be a superstar for the Mariners. Just didn't work out. And then eventually Julio Rodriguez came through. He became a superstar. And guess what? He's really taken a massive step back since they gave him that big-time contract. Still a good player, but not the same guy that he was early on. So I don't know how it's going to work, but I do appreciate that they're at least giving you a glimpse into what their plan's going to be next year. I think their actions will tell us really what their plans are going to be, though. All right, last thing here on John Mozeliak's interview with Martin Kilcoyne from Fox 2. He was asked directly, and I'm glad Martin did this because we've all heard the buzz around town, hey, the Cardinals are going to be up for sale. So he asked him directly, Mo, what do you know about that?
I think I would know if they were being sold, but I do not believe they're going to be sold. I hear those rumors as well. I recently spoke with Bill. I did not get any indication that this team was going to be sold. Again, I think he takes great pride in owning a baseball team, and I think he wants to continue to do so.
Martin earlier today, for what it's worth, said he thinks it's going to be a family business. It's going to be eventually, I don't know when, but eventually it'll be handed off to Bill DeWitt III. That's how I've always been under that impression as well. Who knows? But I don't think they were going to come out and say that it was going to be sold, even if it was.
Yeah.
Even if they were planning next week to put the team up for sale, I don't think anybody at the Cardinals is going to be willing to come out and say that until the official announcement.
Especially for the state of the Cardinals right now, it doesn't seem like, even if it was true that they're looking for a sale, not the time to go out there and say we're ready to sell things.
Again, I want to make this very clear. This is not based on reporting. This is just like reading the tea leaves, right? If the Cardinals were going to be for sale, next year is the offseason when you probably would do it. Yep. Because there's a transition in place where everything inside of the organization is ready to go, right? You've invested in your infrastructure in the minor league system. You have a new president of baseball operations in charge. You have removed at that point a lot of the big money deals from the books, and then the new owner can come in that scenario, and they don't have to worry about trading away superstars. They don't have to worry about their books. Financially, they're in good shape. Like, it would be a good spot to do that. I don't get the sense that that's what the Cardinals are doing. I think this is truly about them trying to set themselves up for a potentially longer run. They've seen this. What they've done hasn't worked. Maybe this will, but I don't think those questions are going away anytime soon. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll talk to Jeremy Rutherford. He's the Blues insider for The Athletic. But coming up next, it's time for The Junk Drawer here on BK and Ferrario. All right, let's dive into the junk drawer. T-Bone, what do you got for us today?
All right, guys. I don't know if this is a brag of how good Apple's security is, or if this is a help us, our security's too good.
Okay.
But a chance for us to win $1 million here. Apple will pay up to $1 million to anyone that can hack into their AI servers.
$1 million, huh?
Yeah.
It's time to become a hacker.
Yeah. You in? Can you do that?
You act like that's something we could do overnight.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a hacking for dummies.
I'm sure there is. I bet you could find that book at a Barnes & Noble.
I'll Google it right now.
I think this is something that is
Hacking for
specifically
dummies.
There you go.
I'll send this to you right now, BK.
I think this is something that it was made for BK and Ferrario.
Yeah.
We are ready to go. This is our calling. Have you ever seen the movie Black Hat?
No.
Dude,
It's a Michael Mann movie.
Hold on, before we go deep into this.
What?
You didn't realize that there was an on and off switch on your garbage disposal, and you think we're just going to start hacking?
I did eventually find that out. Now I had
After
to
you
disassemble
purchased
everything
a
and
new
purchase
one.
the
He
new
hadn't
one
read
and
the
put
book
it in.
yet. Garbage disposal for dummies.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
See?
T-Bone
I'm
gets
going
it.
to Google that one, too. Garbage disposals for
Dude,
dummies.
I made another stupid mistake the other day.
Shocker.
All these toys that you have to put together, we have to come together as a country and say no more. Enough of
No
this.
more toys. All right.
No. The toys are fine.
Oh.
I have to put everything together. I have to assemble this thing after you've sent it to me,
What
and
you
you
have to build?
Like,
yeah, what was the problem, man?
okay, so you know the wagon that kids have,
The
like
one
the
that-
mini
the
wagon,
Fisher-Price
red
wagon?
one. No, I
you just
forget
put
what it's
wheels
called.
on?
The radio something or another.
Oh, the
wagon.
radio flyer one? Yeah, we got one of those. Yeah.
So you have to put that thing together. There's only like 3 steps to it. It's not super hard. You basically put the wheels on and put the handle on.
Yeah.
Here's the problem.
You can't
My
do
dumb
that?
behind. I forgot to put the handle part. It like goes through the axle that goes through the wheels. So I'm an idiot. And there's like a little like lever that you can go back and forth on it, and you can determine whether or not you want to like pull it or have it straight up, right? Well, I thought that was how you held the handle on. So I just did that instead of putting it through the axle where there's the hole in the bottom of it. So now ours is just like hanging on essentially. My wife the other day, God bless her, she was trying to fix it. She's like, well, I got to put this through the hole. I think something happened. Luca must have somehow pulled it out. I genuinely let her believe that.
Of course you did. You blamed your little son. You blamed your kid for the inability to put together a wagon.
Correct.
Coming up next, BK is going to hack into Apple.
I let her believe it, and then she's about 45. I let her believe it for 45 minutes, and eventually I was like, all right, listen, I got to fess up. I think I messed up.
Luca had been put in timeout already. He's been punished. No dinner. All right, Carol, look, I know that we just punished Luca. That's
She's
on me.
over here with like a screwdriver trying to pop these things off. She's like, I can't figure out how to do this. I don't think you can, Kara. I think you have to do that before you put it on.
Did she know that you put? Did she like see you put it together?
This was a while ago.
I can't
months
imagine
ago.
if she saw you put that together. Her first thought wasn't, "Man, BK again."
I actually haven't had problems with putting together the girls' toys. I've had
dude, I'm
so
the
far
worst.
I've had
America
success.
hasn't.
I mean, I put together that big playground set in our backyard, which broke like the next 2 days because the wood warped.
I put together my file cabinet upside down, and I asked Kara, I was like, what did I do with this? And she's like, I think it might be upside down. I was like, no, that's stupid. I got mad at her, lashing out in all directions. I'm like,
I just picture him looking at it.
Hold on, what did you do?
I start like punching the thing. I'm like, this isn't right.
The file cabinet, right?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
And
You lash out a lot, man.
well, I don't like when I'm bad at things. I'm really bad at things. When I'm bad at something and I'm struggling, it makes me upset, and I don't understand why my dumb brain can't figure it out. So that's specifically, I'm glad we did this. It got me to the heart of the issue, which is that I'm
That
bad
you
at
blame
things.
your 1-year-old son when things are put
No,
together properly by
but
daddy?
This is the only skill I have, and I'm still not great at it. But if I don't have this, Tommy Mattern, I got nothing. So please.
Dude, I had a moment the other night, which this is totally off topic. I had a moment the other night where I was having like an adult conversation with my wife, and I referenced to myself as daddy. Because I say it all the time with the girls. Have you ever had one of those where you say something and you stop in your tracks, you're like,
Well, he had that moment on the show yesterday, that's for sure.
Coming
Yeah,
up
success.
next, Jeremy Rutherford, Blues Insider for The Athletic, joins us here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Ted Drew's, the famous frozen custard off of Chippewa, that destination that has been up since 1929. My mom's taking my girls out for a trunk or treat tonight with my wife. They're going to do the trunk or treat, and then they're headed over to Ted Drew's to get that famous frozen custard. Halloween season, they're going to get the great pumpkin, which I talk about. It's pumpkin pie with vanilla custard and topped with whipped cream. But whatever the flavor is, it's just a great opportunity for you to get out and spend time with family, with friends over at Ted Drew's off of Chippewa. While you're out there, walk across the street, check out the gift shop, and you can see their Ted Drew's unique apparel. You can find Ted Drew's souvenir. You can find Ted Drew's gift cards. All of those are available for you to just sport whatever Ted Drew's you want walking around and get those gifts for Christmas time to fill the stockings a little bit easier rather than trying to come up with different ideas. Get on out there, though. Enjoy the famous tradition that has been around for 95 years, 4 generations of family serving St. Louisans, that famous frozen custard. Ted Drew's. It really is good, guys and gals.
Big news in the NFL. The Baltimore Ravens are trading for Panthers wide receiver Deontay Johnson. That's according to NFL Network. Deontay Johnson, Panthers wide receiver, going to the Baltimore Ravens. We'll discuss that coming up here in just a little bit. But there is news for your St. Louis Blues as well, Alex. A 1-year deal, basically avoiding arbitration with Alexei Toropchenko. $1.7 million for Torpo. That has been agreed to between the team and the player. We're going to discuss that and more with Jeremy Rutherford. He joins us via the 101 ESPN hotline. Blues insider for The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at JP Rutherford. JR, appreciate the time as always, man. What is your insight on this Toropchenko deal?
Yeah, it looks like a good deal for both sides, guys. He's in year 2 of a 2-year deal that paid him $1.25 million, so he'll get the bump to $1.7 million. And, you know, he keeps himself in the mix here. As we've seen, the Blues have a lot of bottom 6 forwards who can contribute, and I think Toropchenko is a big part of that, so he's no way looking from the outside in. But it gets his name on their radar again for next year. And you know, I think kind of like the Jake Neighbors deal where Doug Armstrong came out and said it allows him to go and play in those hard areas and not worry about the contract for the next couple of years. I think Toropchenko is the same way. That's the style that he plays, so now he can go out and do that.
Jared, just big picture, looking at what Doug Armstrong is trying to accomplish right now with a lot of these extensions. We've seen a few guys get those contract extensions so far in the early portion of the season. Is he setting this up to where there's a just slew of players who are UFAs by the time Alexander Steen takes over so that he can adjust the roster as he pleases?
Yeah, I asked him about that the other day. You and I were talking about it with the Jake Neighbors deal, which obviously, he had this year on his deal and then 2 more years. So there were a lot of things lining up in that 2-year window where Alexander Steen takes over for Doug Armstrong. And so I asked Doug about that, and he said, not really, mostly coincidence. He said, the one that is in alignment with Doug Armstrong stepping down and Alex Steen taking over is the Drew Bannister contract, the 2-year deal for him with that interim tag being taken off and him being the head coach for the next 2 years. But player-wise, he said this is just the way the situations fell in terms of the contract negotiations. But, I think we could probably look at the situation and say, yeah, he is trying to give Alex Steen some flexibility. Obviously, Alex Steen is involved in these decision-making processes. Doug Armstrong certainly has the final call, but, Steen's aware of what's going on. I'm sure he's given his input on some of these players and how they determine the length of these deals. Jeremy
Rutherford is our guest here on 101 ESPN. JR, when you think about the RFAs potentially that the Blues had going into this offseason, they're basically taking care of their business early. How much of this was an emphasis based on what you saw last offseason with them offer sheeting other teams?
Yeah, I think, that's definitely going to be a factor. As much as we want to say we probably won't see more offer sheets around the league, you probably will see a couple more. We'll see how that all plays out. But, I do think and I do believe Doug Armstrong when he says this is kind of more getting the house in order. Sure. And I think that the Blues are in this transition period. And when you have guys like Neighbors, like Torpchenko, who you want to be part of this, the Blues are just in a different spot than they were, for the last 10 years under Doug Armstrong. This is, continuation of the retool, trying to keep these young players here in the system. And, these contracts are coming up. So I think that Doug's just trying to know, he said it the other day, trying to know what the payroll is going to be for next year, and he's attacking these one by one.
So, JR, on the ice, we found out yesterday Mathieu Joseph is not with the team. He was sent back to St. Louis. When players are sent back to their home city, that seems like it's a lot more ominous than what it would be if he was just injured for the next 2 games on the road.
Yeah, so Alex, he went into the boards. I think it was the final sequence of that Montreal game the other night, and didn't feel too well after it. He didn't skate yesterday. Of course, we found out Matt DeFranks is there on that trip for the Post-Dispatch and reported that he was sent home back to St. Louis. I don't think the injury is serious. I don't think that the team, the player, feel that it's serious, but you're right. Anytime you do get on the plane and you come back to St. Louis to check it out, those test results could show something different. So we'll wait to hear an update from the Blues on Mathieu Joseph, but won't play tonight and won't play in Philadelphia. But as far as I can tell at this moment, it's just a situation where they knew he wasn't going to play in either 2 of these games. So get back, get the situation looked at, and go from there.
From what you've seen from him this season, Jaron, I know it's small sample size, how massive of a loss is that for St. Louis?
I think it's pretty significant in that he was playing really well. And, we can look up and down the lineup. Obviously, Broberg has been a star. But in terms of the off-season additions, this is one that I don't want to say flew under the radar, because when they got Mathieu Joseph, you looked at him and said, wow, he could add some speed, score you 10 or 12 goals, play on that third line. And we've already seen it. Like, I was in Toronto for that game. You guys saw it, the back check by Joseph. But not just the back check, the ability to get back, get the puck, and then fire it up ice all in one motion. Like, this guy has really brought an element to that third line. And so that was the best line in Montreal. I tweeted the stats from Natural Stat Trick after the game with Bolduc and Schenn. Or I'm sorry, not Schenn, with Holloway. And I think that line is going to be missed as it looked the other night. So they're going to bring Kapanen in tonight on that third line. That's obviously, a different look than what they had in Montreal. So I think Joseph, tough loss. For the Blues' sake, you just hope that he just misses these 2 games.
JR, when you look at what the Blues have right now with Scott Perunovich, got in there for a couple of games in place of Matt Kessel, -2 overall in those games, didn't play a whole lot, and honestly, there were just moments where it didn't look great for him. What do you make of where the Blues are at right now with Perunovich?
Yeah, I think that it's going to come to them placing him on waivers with the potential, if he gets through, to go to Springfield and just see if he can find his game. As a reporter who's objective, you're not rooting for these players, but I've gotten to know Scott the past couple of years. He's a good person, and he's really working hard. And I talked to him this offseason. You could just hear it in his voice that, he knows that you run out of chances at some point. And, watching the game the other night, it was tough. You see, first of all, the Blues are on the power play. If he's going to do anything in this league, it's going to be able to run the point on the power play. And he looked a little tentative in what he wanted to do. You kind of saw a player off to the wing there on the wall anticipating maybe a potential pass, and then Scott put a shot on net. It's almost like, okay, well, they tell me to shoot it, so I better shoot it in this situation. And then it turned into nothing, and then he takes a tough penalty. And, I know he's trying to play physical. I know he's trying to play hard. But with his lack of size and him trying to play physical, the stick runs up and it's a high stick, and then, they get the power play goal against. So it's a tough situation, tough goal for Scott, not playing much of the year, and then when he does get in, not looking too good. So I just think that they're going to come at a crossroads with Scott Perunovich.
Do you think, JR, that there's any trade value for that guy to even flip another player who might need to change his scenery?
I don't. I honestly don't. And if there becomes a situation like that with a player on another team who just needs a change of scenery, there's not going to be any value with that player. And, can that player come here to St. Louis and surprise people? I just don't think there's much upside for a trade. And especially, they could make a trade like we've seen those types of trades in the past. But even if you put him on waivers, I don't know that teams are going to take a chance on Scott and keep him on the NHL roster after picking him up on waivers. I just don't know that anybody's seen enough there to make that waiver claim. So if you can't count on somebody taking him off of waivers, I don't think there's going to be any trade value there either.
JR, appreciate the time as always, man. We'll be reading your great work over at The Athletic, following you along on Twitter as well at JP Rutherford. Appreciate you joining us today on the Callier and Thompson hotline, my friend.
All right, thanks, boys. We'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. That's Jeremy Rutherford joining us here on BK and Ferrario, as he does each and every Tuesday on BK and Ferrario. Alex, before we get to some of the news in the NFL, I did want to ask you your initial thoughts. Talked to JR about this. What do you think about the Blues re-signing Alexei Toropchenko, avoiding arbitration that final?
Yeah, I think that was the important part. You avoid arbitration. He would have gotten, I think it's a $500,000 uptick from what he's making right now. And you don't know, arbitration could put him in a spot where he makes $2 or $3 million. But one thing you do know is when a player takes the Blues to arbitration, it typically doesn't end well with their career in St. Louis. Toropchenko seemingly likes this spot, so makes sense that they got a one-year deal done to just buy out that last RFA status. And I find it fascinating what Doug's doing. I know what JR said and what Army said, that there's no connection with Steen. They've got 7 unrestricted free agents on top of having 5 restricted free agents for that first offseason of Alexander Steen's time here in St. Louis. So I just think there's Armstrong setting this team up to where you've got some pieces in place, the Thomases, the Buchneviches, the Parekos, the Binningtons, but everything else is on the table for Alexander Steen to say, hey, you're taking this team over with a clean slate, decide what you want to do. And Toropchenko is just another example. I'd fully expect Joel Hofer to get a 2-year contract extension at some point that carries him into that first year of Alexander Steen to decide out what you do.
Wonder if they do the same thing with P.O. Joseph.
If he keeps playing, it would make a ton of sense. Like, P.O. Joseph is the only other, and then Radek Faksa, depending on how that looks the rest of the way, he's a UFA after this season. Do you go to him and say, hey, we want you back for 1 more year, and we're bringing you in for $1.5 million?
Only reason I probably wouldn't with him is because he's a potential trade chip at the deadline. Totally. You just never know if another team's going to want him for multiple years.
But you sign the contract. Well, yeah, you're true, but if next year's a cheap contract, and if he plays well.
I just think it's easier, it's cleaner for another team if you can have a potential expiring deal. So for that one, I would probably hold off. But the others, like Alexei Toropchenko, was a no-brainer. Go ahead and get it done. It's costing you basically nothing. This is essentially what he would have had in arbitration. Mm-hmm. This is what the money would have been. Slight uptick potentially from that. But otherwise, you're just buying out the year of arbitration. Yeah. You don't have to do the deal with that. I would do it with P.O. Joseph because you're probably going to have him back either way next year. Yeah. Might as well go ahead and keep him under your control. He's been a good player for you so far. It's clear they like him. Mm-hmm. So if you see a future with him, and they're playing him over Matt Kessel, who I thought they had a future with, go ahead. Well, why not? You know, there's no real downside. And to your point on Hofer, like, hey, if he wants a 5-year deal, go ahead and sign him to a 5-year deal. If he wants a 2-year deal, do that. But I would just go ahead and take care of business now. It allows you to know where you're at with all of these contracts. There's just cost certainty. Smart way to operate.
They've got this team set up to where basically Steen can look at it and say, who do you want, who don't you want? Because the first year you take over, like his first big decision is going to be Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. It's going to be Jake Neighbors getting a contract extension, who's an RFA, I guess, at that point. Or no, he's got one more year after that. But beyond that, I mean, you've got a blank canvas to do what you want where you've got some of the core pieces already in place.
And it might be a situation where they don't want to have to deal with the RFA status for Toropchenko or Pio Joseph or Hofer this offseason, Neighbors, who they just got this done with as well. Because this next year, they want to talk to Dylan Holloway or Broberg, because with 1 year left, that is when you can start talking about a potential extension.
Or they want to know what the salary looks like if they do decide to be buyers, set themselves up to say, hey, let's go find a piece that makes us better for the now and for the next 5-6 years. Like,
there's basically no downside.
Yeah,
and plenty of upside.
You're taking everything off the table for this season, or you're taking everything off the table this season to say, well, we don't know what our salary is going to look like with this. No, you're done with all of your offseason moves now, so that you can approach the trade deadline for next season.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. If you missed any of our conversation with Jeremy Rutherford, check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Center.
If you missed it at the beginning of this segment, we told you that the Baltimore Ravens going all in. They decided to make a big move for Deontay Johnson. We do have the terms on this deal, what they have to give up to get him. You might be surprised by it. We'll tell you next here on 101 ESPN. Big news in the NFL. The Baltimore Ravens have traded for wide receiver Deontay Johnson and a 2025 sixth-round pick. Alex, you've seen the terms on this deal.
Pick, BK.
Also, the Panthers are paying down some of his salary, so it will only be $625,000 that the Ravens owe to Deontay Johnson the rest of the year. By the way, he's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK.
Hi.
T-Bone, what would you guess they had to give up? They're getting Deontay Johnson, a 2025 sixth-round pick, and are basically having to pay nothing, a minimum salary for Deontay Johnson, wide receiver from the Carolina Panthers. What do you think the Baltimore Ravens gave up for that?
All right, I'm thinking like we've seen 2 deals done already. I'm going to say it's like either a second or a third-round pick would be my guess.
Can I?
They gave up a fifth-round pick. They gave up a fifth-round pick, and again, in return, they got Deontay Johnson, a sixth-round pick, and money thrown in to make sure that the Ravens are good with the cap.
Man, Carolina's a terrible organization.
They really wanted to get rid of Deontay Johnson.
Are you...
How did Chiefs not make this move, BK?
Right?
Yeah, man, they needed another weapon.
How did nobody beat this?
Maybe Deontay Johnson's a bad guy and you don't want him in your locker room.
I mean, apparently he's like...
The Steelers got rid of him. They're winning.
Or something. What's going on here, dude?
He's not eating people.
Maybe. Were we sure?
I mean, we haven't seen Andy Dalton since last week.
They're going to get more than this in a comp pick next year when he walks via free agency. Like, they're going to come out ahead by trading for Deontay Johnson.
What's so sweet about it is... Because it's a conditional one, right?
No, they traded a fifth-round
So
pick.
it's not a condition that if they go a certain distance, they go to the fourth? Because I was assuming that's what it was.
No.
I was going to say, what's sweet about this is there's no conditions placed on it, and he goes on and he wins the Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. Like, I'll give up a fifth-round pick for that guy.
How is this all they were able to get for Deontay Johnson? What did they give up for Deontay Johnson in the offseason?
Oh.
I don't even remember.
I don't remember. That was...
Was it a third? Is that what they ended up...
No way.
I can't remember what they ended up giving up for him. They sent Dante Jackson. They sent a cornerback and a sixth-round pick for the Steelers, 2024 seventh-round pick and Deontay Johnson.
So they come ahead.
Yeah, so they won.
They went from a seventh-round pick to a sixth-round pick to a fifth-round pick.
Yeah.
Congratulations to them.
You know what? I take back what I said. Carolina well run.
That is... that's a big move for the Ravens, man. Also, it shows just how little value there is for players at the trade deadline in the NFL. I mean, if you're DeAndre Hopkins got a fifth-round pick, and now Deontay Johnson got a fifth-round pick.
Well,
the Rams can't trade Cooper Kupp. It never would have made sense. They wouldn't have gotten anything in return for him. You're going to get, what, a fourth, maybe?
Yeah, they were asking for a second, but based on this market, they weren't getting that.
Teams aren't paying. They're not paying for players at the deadline.
And I'm shocked by that because, like, these are guys that can change a race.
Yeah.
You know? Like, this isn't like a small deal where it's like, hey, we just acquired, like, a wide receiver that, hey, we were dealing with injuries, so this guy's, like, our number 5.
Yeah, DeMarcus Robinson.
Yeah, we didn't have to attach his name to it, but, yeah, that guy. I can't believe that this is what the price has been for these guys because, like, we've seen, like, I think the Rams, they gave up, like, and again, it's been a couple years, but, like, they recognized that Von Miller, whatever, was 3 years ago for their Super Bowl run. You know what? That's an elite pass rusher that can change the outlook of our football team, and they traded a first-round pick to go get that.
Sure.
I would think that, maybe not a first, but I would think, like, the second-round pick would be in this conversation for some of these guys. Like DeAndre Hopkins, if you don't believe that he's starting to show signs of his age, I can see how you look at him. Same with Mari Cooper and say, that's the guy that we acquired him. He changes the outlook of this.
They got nothing.
And they're all going for like fourth-round picks. I'm genuinely shocked by what the market has been for these wide receivers.
This is a new market inefficiency. If I'm a team, I'm collecting late-round picks during the offseason for the next year's draft. Like, in this draft, I would trade for next year's picks.
So that you could trade those for players at the deadline?
Absolutely.
That's smart.
If you're the Chiefs, if you're the Bills, if you're the Lions, you're the Commanders now, you're the Texans, if you're a known contender, you should be trading late-round picks for the next year's picks to trade for these players at the deadline because they're coming, like, they're paying nothing for Deontay Johnson. They're paying nothing in Buffalo for the rights to have a top 30 receiver in the NFL, I would say right now, and Amari Cooper. Like, these guys are so much better than anything you're potentially going to get in the late rounds. And they come at basically the same cost, because that's what the value is really of those late round picks, is that they're going to be cheap. But these wide receivers are costing you $1 million at the deadline.
I wonder if there's just no leverage anymore in the trade market in the NFL to where teams say,
apparently,
well, you want competition for these guys, and if nobody's willing to pay the price, then you're sitting there like, well, you're stuck with them. And at some point, that team that you originally called to say, like, hey, we're looking to trade him away, we want a second-round pick for him, say, no, I don't need him, until they come calling back and say, fine, we'll just take whatever we get.
I mean, the Chiefs yesterday made another trade. It went under the radar because the guy's not great, but Josh Uche was a defensive end edge rusher for the New England Patriots a couple of years ago, had like 12 sacks for him. He is terrible against the run, but as a situational pass rusher, which matters for a team like the Chiefs when you get into the postseason, third downs are huge. Got to get off the field, got to have a pass rusher in those spots. Traded a 6th-round pick for him. This guy was a 2nd-round pick 3 years ago. Yeah. And they're going to get more via a comp pick, because he's going to walk in free agency. He'll sign with another team, and you'll get 5th or 6th round pick via comp pick for him. And the Chiefs are able to get him for nothing.
Oh, look at the Ravens. They just got a guy for this year, and they got a pick for next year.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like that trade by the Chiefs, the one you just referenced there, that one makes more sense to me, right? Like, that's a guy that doesn't probably change the race in the AFC, comes in, can help you out, to your point, kind of one-dimensional as a pass rusher. 6th-round pick for that guy, that totally makes sense.
That's fair, but it's just the latest in all of these.
Sure.
But Mark Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, now Deontay Johnson.
And those are the ones that are surprising, because there's a chance that we look back on it, and if somebody takes down the Chiefs, or if the Chiefs get to the Super Bowl, odds are that we're looking at probably one of these wide receivers and saying, that's why we didn't see the three-peat, or that is why we saw the three-peat. It was because they had DeAndre Hopkins, or Amari Cooper and Josh Allen just went beast mode in a playoff game, and they sent Patrick Mahomes home packing.
I can't believe this, man. Good on the Ravens. This is a huge move for them. You look at it now, Rashad Bateman's really come along the last few weeks for them. He's had a nice
I gotta
season.
Get rid of him.
Deontay Johnson is a really solid over-the-middle guy. Zay Flowers is solid. You're starting to see Mark Andrews come to earth again, or come back to life. I think he's got 3 touchdowns over the last couple of weeks.
Made Isaiah likely
Derrick Henry.
Pointless.
It's going to be a real bummer for them when they lose to the Chiefs once again in the postseason.
I think should be a little concerned. Chiefs are on high alert right now for the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills.
If you're the Texans, you've got to start thinking about making a move, right? The Bills have added a wide receiver. The Ravens just added a wide receiver. The Chiefs added a wide receiver.
Where do you add if you're
the Texans are now no Nico Collins for at least the next week or two. They just lost Stephon Diggs. It was announced today he's got a torn ACL. He's going to miss the rest of the season. Tank Dell hasn't been the guy that they expected him to be so far this year.
But does Tank Dell become more of the guy now without Stephon Diggs? Like, I feel like they've got
I thought he would have been that without Nico Collins.
Maybe. I feel like they've got depth at wide receiver. I don't know. That team needs to fix their defense.
Sure.
And I don't know if a trade deadline in the NFL going after a defender, unless you're getting Von Miller, makes that big of a difference. So, like, they're a team that's like, you can make a move, but I don't know if it's going to make that much of a difference.
And now there's no weapon to go out and find.
Unless
like, the
Cooper
best
Kupp,
wide receivers are gone,
him.
but Kupp's going to stay in L.A. now. Like, I'd be shocked if he got traded.
Yeah, I don't know who could potentially be traded at this point. I guess it would be...
chef's kiss if the Jets traded Devontae Adams.
That would be amazing, but... My guess is the best receiver available now would be like Darius Slayton.
Either him or Mike
the
Williams.
Giants. Yeah, Mike Williams. I forgot he's potentially still out there. Yeah,
I forgot about
but those guys aren't. Those guys are much below.
Those guys, if a 6th-round pick went for him, I'd go, oh, that makes sense.
Maybe Devontae Adams gets moved out again.
I know that wouldn't that be funny?
From one losing team to another losing team to maybe a winning team. No, your Chiefs team can't get him.
He didn't hear me say it.
No chance he was listening. Right?
No, I wasn't listening. What'd you say?
I already made that comment. Yeah.
It was probably earlier in the show. I didn't hear that.
It was 20 seconds ago.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I'll forgive you. Unlike BK.
Oh, I don't need a forgiveness. I wasn't listening. I'm just, no, you didn't say that.
Open your freaking ears over there then. You know what? That's
the other day I made that mistake with my wife. I wasn't listening, and then I responded and said, oh, yeah, for sure. And then she acted surprised, and I realized in the moment, I was like, oh, no, I have no idea what I just agreed to.
She asked if she looked fat in that dress, and you're like, oh, son of a...
I looked at her and said, I'm so sorry. I have no idea what you just said. I'm just going to fess up right now. I was not listening. I'm going to put my phone down now. Can you please explain to me what that was?
Well, that's the thing. You never fess up. You just keep saying, no, you never said that. You never said that, T-Bone.
He's Alex's T-Bone on BK. Coming up next, is this a legitimate fear for Major League Baseball, or is it just one of those things we say when it happens? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues back in action tonight as they visit the Ottawa Senators. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 6 with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. This Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, is it a legitimate fear for Major League Baseball that we're going to see more and more of these kinds of World Series? Yankees, Dodgers, Mets. I suppose you could throw the Padres into this mix as well. Phillies. The big markets, are they going to start dominating again? With Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex, this is a question that Derek Gould presented on the most recent episode of the best podcast in baseball. It got me thinking. I think I disagree with the notion that things are going to continue to become so polarized that you just annually, it's an annual tradition that you see the big markets, the biggest spenders going up against one another. I mean, we've seen this in the past, right? Like, think back to the late 90s, early 2000s. You saw a lot of the big market teams that were having a lot of success. Now, the Cardinals were one of them, and they operated at the time like a big market, even though they weren't a big market. And then it went through a down cycle where you saw from like the late 2010s into the mid 2010s some smaller market teams that were able to have some success. The Giants weren't operating like a top 5 market at that point. They weren't going out there and just buying up all of the best free agencies and best free agents in the sport. They were drafting and developing and supplementing it with talent from outside. It's what every good team is supposed to do, right? So are we seeing some polarization in terms of the talent starting to accumulate on the coasts? Yeah, I think you've seen some of that, but that's always been the case. I don't know that this is any different than it has been in the past, other than that we got Dodgers-Yankees in the World Series for the first time in 40 years. It's been a hell of a lot of fun to watch, honestly. I don't think this is going to become an annual tradition, though.
I don't think it's going to be something like for the next 10 to 15 years, you're only going to be talking about the Dodgers, the Yankees, these like high payroll teams. I do think if you're Major League Baseball, though, you're starting to look at this and be like, man, at some point this is going to get to it's going to get frustrating for fans when all of these available free agents are picking 2 or 3 destinations and that's where they're heading. It kind of dampers down the offseason because you see these high names like Juan Soto, for example. If you're basically any team other than the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, I'm not sure you're thinking that there's a realistic chance that Juan Soto can be a part of your team. And I don't know if it's always been that way because at least in the past, and maybe this was just my dumb young self, you'd see free agents be like, oh, damn, my team could get that player. Even a Manny Machado. You knew the Cardinals wouldn't, but you're thinking my team could jump into that race.
The Cardinals still can. The Cardinals can go out and get that player that you're talking about. They don't very often, but they could. They added $35 million in Nolan Arenado.
But they can't compete with these teams when it comes to the money that those teams are willing to throw.
They choose not to.
Yeah.
That's their decision. Yeah. The Kansas City Royals just gave more than $300 million to Bobby Witt Jr. Like, every team in baseball can go out and spend the money that you're talking about.
Tampa Bay Rays did it with Wander Franco. Now, that didn't work for off-field issues, but, I mean, if Tampa can do it, anybody can do it across baseball.
So, like, the Cardinals had those contracts that you're talking. Alex, they had $90 million committed between Arenado, and this is if they would have brought back Paul Goldschmidt. They had potentially next year $90 million committed to Arenado, Goldie, and Sonny Gray. 3 players, $90 million in total between the 3 of them, because $35 million for Arenado, $25 million would have been the expectation for Paul Goldschmidt, and $30 million for Sonny Gray. So they can go out and make those moves that we're talking about. They opt against it because they don't want the long-term commitments, but they could. The Padres have done that. The Padres aren't a big market team. They just operate like some big market teams because they're willing to take the risk that exists within these really long-term
But it's
contracts.
also a destination where free agents want to go.
Sure.
And it's hard to put yourself in that position
if you're not have the money. Unless you spend the money. That's how you have to do it.
And
why did
win.
Christian Yelich decide to stay in Milwaukee? Because they presented him an offer that he wasn't going to say no to. Hasn't worked out very well for Milwaukee, but that guy would have been one of the top free agents on the market had he arrived at the market. But he chose not to.
But he was there first. They traded for him, and they were able to keep him there and then do that.
That's within the rules. The Mets did that with Francisco Lindor.
I agree with that, but I feel like if we're talking about making the trade for the player and signing him, you're right. I'm talking about like guys getting to free agency.
But how many free agents actually, how many of those players that you're talking about actually get to free agency and then change teams? It almost never happens. Most of those guys are either traded before that walk year because their old team wants to get some kind of a return and then sign with their new team. Or like Juan Soto is an example of this. Juan Soto is available to like 3 teams in Major League Baseball. Shohei Ohtani was available to like 3 teams in Major League Baseball. So if we're talking about those players, sure. That's like A-Rod, though. A-Rod 25 years ago, there were only so many teams that were actually going to be interested in his market because of how much he was going to cost. So I don't think anything has really changed in that regard. I think it's just baseball goes through cycles. And right now we are in a cycle where the big markets are so severely outspending the smaller markets, and it works for them this season. I think that could change as soon as next year. Wouldn't surprise me at all if you see a World Series next year that includes Atlanta or Arizona from the National League. And in the American League, could you see something like, hey, maybe Seattle has a really great offseason. They put things together, and offensively things come together. They've got a great rotation. Sure, they could do it. Baltimore, they're not spending a ton of money. Could they get to the World Series next year? Absolutely. So it could just as easily next year be like, oh, well, that was the end of that cycle.
Yeah.
Congrats on the 1 year one-off where it was the Yankees versus Dodgers. At least that's my personal view on it.
Yeah, and I think that whole idea of consolidation of like the best players going out to the coast, I think that's always been there. I mean, you look at it, you've got the free agency where Alex is right. A lot of those teams where they want to sign, either A, there's only 3 teams really in it, or B, guys want to be in a city that is like New York or Philadelphia or on the West Coast. Like, that all makes sense. And like these small market teams, Cleveland's an example. I mean, you mentioned the Lindor. They've always been like feeders into the big market teams. We always see, like, how many times is Pittsburgh, we look at them and go, oh, Paul Skeens, not a Pirate for life.
My entire childhood was the Royals becoming a farm system for the Yankees and the Red Sox.
See, you should actually be a Yankees fan if we think about it.
Over like a 4-year stretch, Carlos Beltran, Jermaine Dye, and Johnny Damon all went to and won a World Series. And I think 2 of them ended up as the World Series MVP. That was the outfield for the Royals in like 2003. And they all ended up going on elsewhere. Zach Greinke ended up going on elsewhere. Like, this has always been the way that the game has operated. You just, as one of those teams, if you are one of those teams, you don't end up keeping your guys. That's your choice, first of all. You could have. You chose not to. Second of all, you got to make sure you take advantage of it when you're in that winning window. That's why it's so important right now for a team like the Pirates. Hey, spend. You don't have to go out there and spend $200 million on your payroll, but supplement your team with the talent that is necessary to take advantage while you have Paul Skeens, while you have this rotation.
Same with the Reds with Deli Cruz.
Absolutely. When you've got that guy internally and you are one of these smaller teams, you got to go for it, man. So this is what frustrates me about Baltimore. It's not a small market team. Stop operating like you are.
Yeah.
Go out there and spend. You've got talent right now internally. Go out there and take advantage of it while you have the opportunity to do so. It's what frustrated me about the Cardinals, frankly. Hey, man, you had 2 borderline MVP candidates. Let's go. Let's push. Now is the time. Because this day was always coming. They did act as if it wasn't. The Cardinals were always going to get to this logical endpoint. They were always going to have to go through some kind of a refresh, retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, because they did finally extend themselves with a contract like Nolan Arenado's. And their talent system, their pipeline, dried up with the pitching. That happens. Sometimes teams go through a dry spell and you lose your way a bit. But they didn't push the way that they probably should have at the time. They didn't take advantage of it.
All right, we'll be back for the next cycle. How about them Cardinals?
Coming up next, well, the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. We just went down a rabbit hole. We were talking about how the Cleveland Guardians don't spend money. Will the Cincinnati Reds spend money because Terry Francona is there? And, of course, when you get to that, we got to talk about Jose Ramirez, who's amazing. He's fantastic. He was 1 double and 1 home run away this year from 40 doubles, 40 homers, and 40 stolen bases in a single season. So that made me wonder, because I am who I am, and I'm a total nerd, has there ever been a season in which a player went 40, 40, 40? 40 doubles, 40 homers, and 40 stolen bases in a single season. There is one. It was Alfonso Soriano, who did so in 2006. Interestingly enough, it was his only year of his career in which he played for the Washington Nationals. Played for the Yankees, played for the Rangers, played for the Cubs. I guess most people probably remember him most locally, at least, for his time with the Cubs. But he was the only guy in Major League Baseball history that did 40, 40, 40. We were 1 double and 1 homer away from seeing that this year with Jose Ramirez. The more you know.
Ohtani, 2 doubles away.
Yeah.
Jose Ramirez and Alfonso Soriano, very different players when you look at it and you say, yeah, I could see 40, 40, 40.
For sure.
How old was Soriano when he did that then? Because that was at the
was
back end of his career, right?
No, it was right in the middle.
Oh, okay. For some reason,
I forgot how the Nationals fell in line with it, because it always felt like it was Cubs, Yankees, like one after the other.
It was Yankees and then Texas and then Nationals for a year and then the Cubs.
I don't remember that.
That was in 2006. He was 30 years old.
It was a Kurt Warner-esque career where it was like, I forgot you played for those 2 teams.
Yeah. Wow. I'm impressed, I guess, that one, all the hints I was given.
He did that for a 71-win Nationals team.
BK was so confident.
Jim Bowden was the general manager that year.
Oh, our buddy Bodes.
So, yeah, the more you know, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. If you missed anything else from our show today, check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Center.
Alex, to finish out the show today, let's start out with the St. Louis Blues, who are back in action. They'll be going up against Ottawa tonight. A game that starts right here on 101 ESPN at 6 o'clock, but Alex is going to have your pregame coverage beginning at 5. You'll be without Mathieu Joseph in this one. He's not going to play in the next 2 games on this road trip. Joe Hofer in net tonight, Alex, is what the expectation is for the Blues. Sounds like Scott Perunovich out, Matt Kessel back in. Kapanen will be replacing Mathieu Joseph in the lineup for the Blues on that third line. Any expectations? My hope is just that they don't fall behind in this one early by multiple goals again.
I actually do feel like they'll play well in this game. This team has shown the ability to rebound pretty quickly after a loss in that Montreal game. Bannister talked about how the first period was kind of frustrating, and then second and third period you saw the growth of this team. I think they'll be better in this one. I think they win this one. I'm going to be very curious how they look at even strength without the engine of Mathieu Joseph, because to me, you've got 2 lines, maybe 3 if you were okay with Sundqvist, Toropchenko, and Radek Faksa. I don't, as much as I love Dylan Holloway, and I think we've seen progress of Zach Bolduc, I don't trust that line when they're out there on the ice against a team that likes to play pretty physical in Ottawa.
T-Bone World Series back in action this evening as well. Game number 4, potentially the end of this series. Dodgers-Yankees. It's a bullpen game for the Dodgers. It is Luis Gil that is getting the start on the Yankees side of things. Think the Dodgers get it done tonight?
Yeah, I think they complete this sweep.
I don't think the Yankees ever lead in this game.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think the Dodgers know that they have the opportunity to jam the knife in the brain and
I think
twist
the Yankees
I don't
win
think
this
they're going to
one.
wait.
I think they force a game 5. We'll get to a game 5, and then that'll be the end of this thing. But I think they've got one last stand in them tonight.
Luis Gil better go out there.
I've not seen anything that looks like a last stand from the Yankees. Yesterday was their last stand game, and
their last stand was against the Cleveland Guardians.
Yeah, I think they're done tonight. I think it's a 4-game sweep.
Man, if it is, I will be fascinated to listen to New York Sports Talk Radio tomorrow morning.
They'll be calm.
We'll go ahead and pull
celebrate,
a few clips.
get into the
They're
World
already
Series.
fine. It was a good season.
Yeah.
It was a successful season.
I don't think Yankees fans will feel that way.
Oh, no, they won't. It's
How do you
New
think
York
Cardinals fans? We'll get into that tomorrow. Well, plenty more to talk about.
Deep tease.
You'll hear Alex Ferrario coming up in about 3 hours for pregame coverage. Blues versus the Ottawa Senators. Mathieu Joseph out. Scott Perunovich out. Kapanen in. Matthew Kessel back in. And it'll be Joel Hofer getting the start in net for the Blues. Again, you'll hear all of that right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN, starting at 5 o'clock. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.